Chapter 30. December. The world does not stop for important things. The world did not pause to acknowledge that something important had begun. This was, Issei reflected, entirely appropriate. Important things rarely arrived with fanfare. They arrived in the middle of ordinary life and insisted on coexisting with it, and the ordinary life did not stop. Classes continued, exams arrived on schedule, the cafeteria served the same rotating menu with the same predictable inconsistency in the quality of the rice. The ORC room was warm and the archive on Shiroko Street was cold in the mornings, and the documentation for the faction submission was being assembled page by careful page. Life, in other words, was full. Issei had always been good at full. He moved through it the way he moved through everything, attentively, efficiently, without waste. He knew which classes required genuine engagement, and which could be navigated on reserve attention. He knew which people in his orbit needed checking on and at what intervals. He knew when the group was working well and when someone was carrying something that needed to be addressed before it became load-bearing in the wrong way. In December he learned something new about himself. He was very bad at being still. The documentation phase did not require the kind of thinking he was best at. It required patience and precision and the willingness to format the same argument in 8 different ways for 8 different audiences. He was good at the argument. The formatting was a different matter. He sat at the table in Kalindra's archive on a Tuesday afternoon in the first week of December, looking at a section of the faction submission that had been correctly structured for 4 hours and was still not quite right, and he was trying to identify the problem. Kalindra set a cup of tea beside him without comment. She sat across from him and opened her own work with the composure of someone who had spent 400 years learning the difference between productive struggle and unproductive friction. "You are fighting the format," she said, without looking up. "The format is inadequate to the content. The format is what the kings will read. If the content cannot be expressed in the format, the content will not be heard. Then the format needs revision." She did look up then, with the amber attention she brought to things she found interesting. "You are 16 years old and you are proposing to revise 4-century-old faction submission protocols. I am proposing that the protocols are a tool, not a constraint, and that a tool which prevents the work from being done is not serving its purpose." A long pause. "The protocols were designed," she said slowly, "to prevent emotional arguments from being submitted as policy proposals. They are formal to the point of rigidity because the people who designed them were trying to prevent passion from substituting for evidence. Which is a reasonable goal," he said. "But our argument is evidence-based. The formality is not protecting the evidence. It is obscuring it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have a contact in the faction administrative office who has been trying to modernize the submission protocols for 30 years. She has been told consistently that the protocols are traditional, and therefore untouchable." "What is her name?" "Veritas. She works in the underworld administrative structure." "Can you introduce us?" Kalindra looked at him over her tea. "You want to reform the protocols at the same time as submitting through them." "I want to do both things in the right order," he said. "The submission is time-sensitive. The protocol reform is long-term. But if we establish the contact now, the reform can proceed in parallel." She set down her cup. "You are going to keep doing this, are you not? Finding the next problem inside the current solution. Is that a problem?" "No," she said, with the dry warmth he had come to recognize as her version of genuine affection. "It is the most exhausting and necessary quality I have encountered in 400 years of watching people attempt to change things. Do not lose it." "I will try not to," he said. He went back to the document. He found the problem. It was in the 3rd section, where the evidence for friction reduction was being compressed to fit the word limit, and the compression was removing the specificity that made the evidence convincing. He rewrote it in half the words without losing a single piece of substance, and the section was better, and he moved on. Matsuda and Motohama had been patient for 3 months. This was longer than anyone who knew them would have predicted. They had received the explanation of the supernatural world in October and had, after the initial period of adjustment, integrated it into their understanding of Issei with the particular resilience of people who had been his friends long enough to accommodate remarkable new information about him. But 3 months of watching him disappear into the old school building every afternoon, and come home with the expression of someone engaged in something important and large had accumulated into a need for information that patience could no longer contain. They found him on Thursday at lunch. "We are not asking for details," Matsuda said, which was not true but was a good faith attempt. "We are asking for the general shape of things." "The general shape," Motohama added, "of why you have been going to the archive on Shiroko Street twice a week, why there is a woman with 9 tails who sometimes walks to school with you, and why the old gymnasium has been making sounds on weekday evenings that are consistent with significant physical activity." Issei looked at his lunch. He thought about what he could say and what was safe to say and what was simply the truth stripped of specifics. "I am working on something," he said. "Obviously," Matsuda said. "It involves the group in the ORC room and some people who joined recently, and a project that is going to take several more months to complete. The details are," he paused, "not mine alone to share. But the general shape is, we are trying to make something better. Something that has been wrong for a long time. Something supernatural," Motohama said. "Yes. Are you safe?" Issei looked at him. The question was direct and genuine, and came without any of the hedging that questions like that sometimes carried. "Yes," he said. "I am safe." The dangerous part was in October. "The part we did not know about," Matsuda said. "The part one could not tell you about while it was happening." "I am sorry for that." They were quiet for a moment. Then Matsuda picked up his chopsticks. "You are going to keep doing important things that we cannot always know about," he said. It was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact being accepted. "Probably," Issei said. "Yes. Then we are going to keep being your friends," Motohama said, with the same tone. "Because that is also what we do." Issei looked at both of them. They were eating their lunches with the uncomplicated dedication of people who had said the important thing and were now moving forward. "Thank you," he said. "Stop thanking us for being your friends," Matsuda said. "It is strange." "It is not strange. It is appropriate." "It is both," Motohama said. "Eat your rice." He ate his rice. The afternoon light came through the cafeteria windows at the particular angle that only happened in December, flat and gold, and everything in it looked like something worth keeping. Chapter 31. Lyriel and the Forest Court Letter. The letter from the Forest Court arrived in the second week of December. Lyriel received it the way she received most things now, with a steadiness that had not been there 3 months ago, when she had arrived in Ko alone and frightened and performing calm over the fear with varying degrees of success. The steadiness was real now. It had been built from specific materials, the coat from burro, worn every cold morning. The archive sessions with Kailindra, where her memory functioned as it was designed to and was valued for it. The evenings in the ORC room where nobody treated her ears as a feature requiring accommodation. She sat with the letter in the small study room she used for independent work, and she read it carefully. Then she folded it, and went to find Issei. He was in the library, which was where he was most afternoons when he was not at the archive. She sat across from him and set the letter on the table between them. "My mother," she said. He looked at the letter. He did not open it because it was not his to open. "She knows about the faction submission," Lyriel said. "The Forest Court has its own network. She heard that a High Court elf bloodline is involved in a proposal to the Devil Kings." A pause. "She is not angry." "She is," Lyriel searched for the word, "complicated." "What makes it complicated?" "She is proud. She is also afraid. She is proud because the Forest Court has been arguing for formal representation for 3 generations, and the fact that her daughter is part of the mechanism that might finally achieve it is," she stopped. She used the word historical. She called it historical. "And the fear? That I am too close to it. That if it fails, I will be hurt in ways that are specific to having invested in something this large." Lyriel looked at the folded letter. "She is not wrong to be afraid of that." "No," Issei said. "She is not. You are not going to tell me the fear is unnecessary. The fear is accurate. Investing in something large creates the possibility of a correspondingly large disappointment. That is true." He looked at her. "The question is whether the possibility of disappointment is a reason not to invest." She was quiet for a moment. "I do not think it is," she said slowly. "For me. But I understand why she thinks it might be. Then tell her that. Tell her both things. That you understand her fear and that you have made a different calculation with the same information. She will want to come here. Is that a problem? Lyriel considered. No, she said, and something in the word was surprised, as though she had expected the answer to be yes and had discovered it was not. I would like her to see this. I would like her to see, she gestured, meaning the library and the school and the city and the ORC room and all of it, what I found. Then invite her, Issei said simply. She picked up the letter and held it for a moment. She will like you, she said. I want you to know that in advance. She has very specific opinions about people, and you are exactly the kind of person she has opinions about. Should I be concerned? The opinions are good, she said, and for the first time in the conversation, she smiled. It was a smile that contained her mother and her home and the forest court and 3 months of distance from all of them, and the complicated warmth of someone who had been away long enough to miss the thing they left, and returned to it changed. Good, Issei said. I look forward to meeting her. Lyriel's mother arrived a week later. Her name was Silvara, and she was tall in the way that high court elves were tall, not enormously, but with the particular quality of height that was about proportion rather than measurement, as though she had been built by someone with a strong opinion about how things should look. Her hair was the same deep brown as Lyriel's, worn in a forest court arrangement that was more complicated than anything Issei had encountered in any human context. Her ears were longer than her daughter's, fully extended from the moment she stepped through the school gate, and she wore them with the absolute ease of someone who had never once considered accommodating other people's discomfort. She walked into the ORC room and took the measure of it with a single slow survey. Then she looked at her daughter. Your ears, she said. Lyriel's hands went self-consciously to the sides of her head. Her ears were extended. They had been extended, Issei realized, for most of the past month. Yes, Lyriel said. They have been this way since you arrived here? Since a few weeks after I arrived. Silvara was quiet for a moment. Then she looked around the room again, more slowly this time, and something in her expression shifted from assessment to understanding. Good, she said. The word was simple and carried an enormous amount. She turned to Issei. She looked at him with the amber eyes that Lyriel had, and she looked for a long time with the particular attention of a person who was reading something they wanted to understand accurately. You are the one, she said. I am one of several, he said. You are the first, she said. The first matters differently from the others. It sets the tone. She kept looking at him. My daughter's letters have been different since October. The writing is the same. The person writing is different. Lighter. More fully herself. She paused. I wanted to see who was responsible. The group is responsible, he said. I just started it. Silvara looked at him for another moment. Then she did something he had not expected. She placed her right hand briefly on his left shoulder, the hand that was not the gauntlet side, and held it there for exactly 3 seconds, which he would learn later was the forest court gesture of formal acknowledgement between equals. Thank you, she said. She said it with the weight of a mother who had watched her child be small for too long, and had just seen evidence that the smallness was ending. He did not know what to say. He said, she makes it easy. Silvara smiled. It was Lyriel's smile, translated 1 generation back, with 400 more years of patience in it. Yes, she said. She does. You were paying attention. Chapter 32. Stellar Navigation and a Very Long Conversation About Stars. Stella had a question she had been carrying since November. She did not ask it the way most people ask questions, with a preamble, or a context setting or a social negotiation about whether the question was appropriate. She asked it in the middle of Tuesday afternoon in the ORC room when there was a natural pause in the work, looking at the ceiling with her starlit eyes, as though she was reading the answer there and simply needed him to confirm it. When you look at the group, she said, what do you see? Issei considered the question. What kind of seeing? Any kind. All kinds. She looked at him. I ask because I see trajectories. I see the lines each person is moving along and the convergences where they intersect and the ways the intersections change both lines. And when I look at the group as a whole, the pattern is, she paused, unusual. In a specific way. What way? Each person's trajectory has accelerated since arriving here. Not in the direction of power or capability, necessarily. In the direction of themselves. Each line is moving more clearly and more directly toward what that person actually is. She tilted her head. I have not seen that pattern before. Most convergences create compromise. People adjust toward each other, and the lines blur. These lines are becoming clearer. Issei thought about that. Is that what you wanted to ask about? No. The observation is the context. She looked at the ceiling again. The question is, are you doing that deliberately? He was quiet for a moment. Then, I am doing it consciously. I am not sure deliberately is the right word. Deliberately implies I am applying a technique. It is more that I believe each person knows what they are, better than anyone else does, and that my job is to make it easier for them to be that rather than to shape them towards something different. Why do you believe that? Because the alternative seems presumptuous. And also because I have been in situations where someone tried to shape me towards something different, and it did not feel like being helped. It felt like being managed. Stella was quiet for a while. The starlight in her eyes moved slowly, the particular rotation that meant she was processing something in the celestial framework rather than the social one. My mother, she said eventually, was a navigator of the highest order. She could read any trajectory in any system. She was extraordinary. A pause. She spent a great deal of my childhood trying to teach me her method. The specific way she read. And I could not learn it, because my method is different. Not worse. Just different. She was shaping rather than supporting, Issei said quietly. She did not know they were different things. She thought she was passing on a gift. Stella's voice was careful and even. I do not blame her. She was doing her best with a framework that did not account for the possibility that her student was not a lesser version of her but a different thing entirely. Did she ever understand that? Near the end, yes. She told me once that the stars I read are ones she had never been able to see. That my range exceeded hers in the ways that mattered most for what was coming. A long pause. She meant this conversation. She meant this group. She had seen it coming for years and could not tell me directly because she could not read the specifics, only the significance. Issei was very still. She knew about this. She knew that something was building around my trajectory that would require exactly the kind of reading I do. She made sure I had time to develop it before she was gone. Stella. She died 2 years ago, Stella said. Quietly and without distress, the way she said things that were simply true. Celestial lineage does not prevent ordinary endings. She was not supernatural in the sense that you and the others are. She was simply a very good reader. I'm sorry, Issei said. Thank you? She looked at him. I wanted you to know because you asked what I see and I see her work in this group. The preparation. The years of building toward a convergence she could not fully describe. Her star-lit eyes were very direct. She would have liked you. She would have said finally. Someone worth the wait. The ORC room was quiet with the particular quality of a space holding something that mattered. I will try to be worth it, he said. You already are, she said simply, and went back to her charts, and the stars in her eyes moved in their slow rotation, and somewhere in that rotation was a woman who had navigated by different stars and left her daughter to find the ones that mattered. That evening Issei sat on the ORC room couch for longer than usual after everyone had gone. He thought about mothers and legacies and the things people left behind that were larger than what they knew they were leaving. He thought about his own parents, who were entirely human and entirely ordinary, and who had given him the particular gift of a house where questions were welcome and silence was comfortable, and nobody told him the unusual way he thought about things was a problem. He thought about Drake, who had been in his arms since birth, dormant and patient, drawing him toward dragons in every notebook margin. Drake, he said. Yes. Did you know about Stella's mother? I knew something was reading US from a celestial framework during the early years. I assumed it was standard navigation oversight. Not standard. Apparently not. A pause. It is strange to think that we were being watched over by someone we never met. It is not that strange, Issei said. Most of us are watched over by someone we do not know about. Parents of parents. Teachers who left a mark before we were born. The long chain of people who built the world we inherited. You are feeling philosophical tonight. I am feeling grateful, he said. There is a difference. A warm pulse. Yes, Drake said. There is. Chapter 33. Akino Himejima tells the true story. She had promised, in November, to explain herself to the people in the room she had not yet explained herself to. She kept that promise on a Friday evening in mid-December, when the school was quiet and the ORC room was warm and there was tea, because she had decided that the telling was easier with something warm to hold. She sat in the center of the room. Everyone was there. She held her cup in both hands and she told the true story. The true story was this: Akino Himejima was the daughter of Barakiel, a fallen angel, and a human woman named Shuri who had loved him without reservation and been killed for it when Akino was young, by people who could not accept the union. Akino had been left alone in a world that had no category for her, and had found Rias's peerage not as a rescue but as the first place that had ever looked at her and said, "You are what you are, and that is sufficient." She told it plainly. She did not perform the difficult parts. She did not manage the room's response. She told it the way Kurama had written her account, because the feelings were also facts, and the facts deserved to be complete. When she finished, the room was quiet. Kurama was the first to speak. "Thank you for telling us. Thank you for listening." Akino looked at her cup. "I have told parts of this before. Different parts to different people at different times, in the way you tell things when you are managing what the other person can handle. This is the first time I have told all of it in one room to everyone. How does it feel?" Liriel asked. Akino considered this seriously. "Lighter," she said. "And larger." "Lighter because the weight is distributed now. Larger because she paused, it became more real when I said it. Some things become smaller when you say them. This became the correct size." Mira was very still across the room. Her forearms were folded in the configuration that meant deep feeling being held with care. "The people who killed your mother," she said, and then stopped. "Yes," Akino said. "I know. You do not have to complete the sentence. I have completed it many times. Are you all right?" Mira asked. "More simply, I am," Akino said. "I have been all right for a while now. The story is old. I am not the person in it anymore. I am someone who has the story and has also this room and this group and," she looked at Issei, "someone who noticed I was reconsidering the walls I had built and did not push through them but waited." Issei said nothing because there was nothing to say. "He is terrible at compliments," Tosca said from her corner. "He is excellent at everything except receiving things," Akino said, and her voice had the warmth that meant she was smiling. "Which is, as I have told him, something we are working on together." "Working on it how?" Kurama asked, with the dry precision of someone genuinely interested. "Slowly," Issei said. "He accepted a cup of tea from Stella last week without saying thank you 3 times first," Akino said. "That is progress," Stella confirmed, from the floor. Issei looked at the room. At all of them, the specific and extraordinary people in it, and something that had been sitting in his chest for months settled into a fullness that was not uncomfortable but was very present. "I am glad you told us," he said to Akino. Simply. She looked at him with a real smile. "I know you are. That is why I could." Later, when the room had thinned to just the two of them, Akino spoke again. "There is something I want to ask you," she said. "Ask." "My father," she said carefully. "Barakiel. He has been," she paused. "He has been attempting to reconnect for several years. I have not allowed it. I have told myself it was because I was not ready, and that has been true, but I think it has also been because I was afraid that ready was something I could not become alone." "You are not alone," he said. "No." She looked at her hands. "I am thinking about writing to him. In the new year. When the submission is done, and there is space for something personal." She looked at him. "I wanted to tell someone. In advance. So that it was real before I decided not to do it." "It is real," he said. "Yes." She took a breath. "Good." She picked up her coat and her bag. She paused at the door. "Issei." "Yes." "The thing you said in the library, months ago. About putting things down." "I am putting something down." "I know," he said. "Thank you for making the space for it." "Always," he said, and she left, and the room held the warmth of what had just happened. Chapter 34. Winter Break and the Archive That Does Not Close. School ended for the winter break on the 22nd of December. This had no effect on the work. Kalindra's archive operated on its own schedule, which was the schedule of someone who had been awake for most of 4 centuries and found the concept of holiday break intellectually interesting but personally inapplicable. The documentation for the faction submission was in its final revision stage, which meant that it required the kind of attention that did not recognize weekends or school calendars. By agreement, everyone came in when they could and no one was required to come in when they could not. The result was that the archive was occupied at all hours by rotating combinations of people, and the work moved in a continuous stream that respected the human need for sleep and festivity but did not wait for it. Issei came every day. He came not because he could not stop but because he genuinely wanted to be there, which he understood was different. He came because the work was at a stage where each day produced something tangible, a section completed, a source confirmed, an argument tightened to the point where it could not be weakened by a single additional cut. He also came because the archive at this stage of the break was a particular kind of place. The school was closed and Ko was quieter, and the city had the quality it always had in the week before the new year, reflective, suspended, aware of itself as something between what it had been and what it was about to become. On the 24th, he arrived to find Rias already there. This was unusual only in that she was not working. She was sitting in one of the reading chairs near the back of the first room with a book in her lap, not looking at it, looking at the middle distance with the expression she wore when she was thinking about something specific and had decided to think about it properly rather than around its edges. He sat in the chair across from her. He did not ask. She looked at him. My family has a tradition for the winter solstice. Everyone comes to the estate. My brother. His wife Graphia. Several cousins. My parents. A pause. I did not go this year. I told them I was needed here. Were you? The work could have waited 3 days. She looked at the book in her lap. I told them I was needed because it was easier than explaining that I am. She stopped. That I am different now. And I was not ready to be different at them yet. He understood what she meant. The family who knew you at one particular size, and the specific difficulty of returning to them when you had become a different size, not larger or smaller necessarily, but differently shaped. You will have to do it eventually, he said. I know. A small pause. I am not afraid of it. I am aware that it will take energy I did not used to need for that particular conversation. Your brother already knows you are different, Issei said. He saw it in November. Surzex has always seen me more clearly than I let on. Something warm and complicated in her voice. He has also always been patient enough not to say so before I was ready to hear it. Then the conversation is probably easier than you are expecting, Issei said. She looked at him. How can you be confident of that? Because you described a brother who sees clearly and is patient. Those are exactly the qualities you need for a conversation about becoming different. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he sent a message last week. He said he wished I had come. He also said he understood why I had not, and that when I was ready he would like to introduce me to someone. Who? He did not say. He said she had been working on the representation problem from a different angle for several years, and that he thought we would find each other useful. Rias looked at the middle distance. He is matchmaking. For the project, not personally. He does that. He finds people who should be in contact, and creates the opportunity. That sounds like someone who thinks in systems, Issei said. It sounds like someone who was taught to govern by someone who believed the most important skill a leader had was recognizing where the right people were and getting them into the same room. Smart teacher. She was, Rias said quietly. She died when I was 12. I am still finding the things she left in the world. The archive was warm and quiet. Outside, Ko was preparing its winter version of itself. Someone down the street was playing music that was barely audible through the archive's thick walls, something gentle and old. Come back for the new year, Issei said. Your family. I was planning to. Good. Tell them what you have been doing. The real version. They will be proud. She looked at him. You are very confident about other people's families. I pay attention to what people tell me about the people they love. You have talked about your brother since we met. Everything you have said tells me he is someone who will be proud. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment. All right, she said. New Year. I will go. Good. She opened her book. He opened his notes. The archive around them held its warm, familiar quiet, and outside, the winter city reflected the last long light of the year into the small windows near the ceiling. Chapter 35. Mira builds something. Mira had been taking the Eastern Chimeric Academy courses remotely since October. By December she had completed the first 3 modules and had, in the language of the Academy's feedback system, significantly exceeded the expected progression rate for a student at the introductory level. The feedback also noted, with the particular care of academics who were excited but trying not to show it, that her practical application work demonstrated an understanding of chimeric theory that the introductory modules did not fully account for. She showed Issei the feedback on a Thursday morning in the archive's outer room, holding the tablet with all 4 hands in the way she did when she was genuinely pleased about something and was still learning that this was allowed. They want me to move to the intermediate track, she said. Do you want to? Yes. But the intermediate track requires a capstone project and she paused. I have an idea for the project. I wanted to think about it with someone before I proposed it to the faculty. Tell me. She set the tablet down. She had brought a notebook, which she opened to a page of drawings, precise, detailed sketches that were part architectural diagram and part something else he did not have a category for. A building, she said. Not a real building for the project. A theoretical one. A structure designed for people like me. Like all of us. She spread her hands over the drawings. Every structure I have ever been in was designed for one kind of body. One kind of presence. You can see it in the doorways and the ceiling heights and the way the spaces flow. Everything was built for a specific assumption about what a person looks like. And you want to build something that does not make that assumption, Issei said. I want to design something that actively invites every kind of presence. Where the space itself communicates, you belong here, regardless of how many arms you have or what your wings need or whether your shadow occupies a different layer than the floor. She looked at the drawings. I know it is theoretical. I know it is for a project. But I have been thinking about it for months and I think, she stopped. I think it is the truest thing I have ever wanted to make. He looked at the drawings carefully. They were extraordinary, even in sketch form. A building that had thought about its occupants with the specific generosity of someone who had experienced the alternative. The doorways are double height, he said. But they narrow toward the top for people who prefer enclosed entry points. You get the scale without losing the intimacy. Yes. Exactly. She leaned forward. And the ceiling panels can be adjusted for people who need altitude, the way Tosca sometimes needs to extend fully, without making the space feel cavernous for smaller occupants. The lighting system accounts for Stella's sensitivity to certain frequencies. I notice she sometimes squints at the school's fluorescent lights. The spectrum here is warmer and adjustable. And this section, he said, pointing to an area that appeared to have no fixed walls, is shadow capable. Sable could exist in their natural state in this space without needing to maintain a solid boundary. Yes. Mira was looking at him with the bright, startled pleasure of someone who has had their work understood fully. You see it. It is a building designed for this group, he said. Specifically, it started as that, she admitted. And then I realized the specific group is the proof of concept for the general principle. If you can design a space that holds all of us comfortably, you have solved most of the problems that spaces create for anyone who falls outside the design assumption. He looked at the drawings for a long moment. Submit it, he said. You think it is good enough? I think it is better than good enough. I think it is the kind of work that changes the way a field thinks about a problem. He looked at her. Submit it. She looked at the drawings. Her 4 arms did the thing they did when she was genuinely moved. The 2 lower ones pulled slightly inward, a small self-holding gesture that she had stopped apologizing for. I am going to put everyone's name in the acknowledgments, she said quietly. With permission. Because it would not exist without all of you being real. I think everyone will say yes, he said. They did. Chapter 36. January and the new weight of things. January arrived with a quality Issei had not expected, relief. Not the relief of something ending. The relief of something settling. The documentation was submitted on the 5th of January, transmitted to Surzex through the formal channel that Grafia managed, and its departure created a peculiar lightness in the archive and the ORC room, the specific quality of space after something large has been carried out of it. They had made the argument as well as it could be made. It was in the hands that needed to hold it. The 6-month timeline was running. Now there was the work of continuing to be people. Kaneko, who had been present through everything with the quiet consistency of someone who was the room's structural foundation rather than its visible architecture, said something on the first day back at school that Issei thought about for a long time afterward. She said it in passing, while they were walking between the main building and the old gymnasium for the training session that had continued through the break. "You are tired," she said. "I am fine," he said. "Both can be true." She looked at him sideways. "You have been managing everyone's emotional state for 3 months while also managing the documentation, while also managing school. You are fine. You are also tired. The tiredness is valid." He was quiet for a moment. "When did you become perceptive?" "I have always been perceptive," she said. "I am also small, which means people underestimate me, which means I observe more than anyone realizes. It is a useful combination." "Yes," he said. "I imagine it is. You need to let yourself rest," she said. "Not from the group. You do not experience the group as effort, I have noticed that. From the part that watches to make sure everyone is all right. That part can rest sometimes. Everyone in the group is all right. You built something that can hold its own weight now." He looked at her. She was looking straight ahead with the expression she wore when she had said the thing she meant to say and was waiting for the world to absorb it. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me. Rest. I will try." "Try harder," she said. He tried harder. Resting, it turned out, looked like this. He read things that had nothing to do with the project. A novel about a lighthouse keeper who was also a philosopher, which Kailindra had found in the archive's recreational collection and left on his usual table without comment. A book of mathematics that was purely theoretical and beautiful, and had no application to anything he was currently working on, which was exactly the point. He sat on the roof with Tosca on Tuesday afternoons when the weather was reasonable and they talked about things with no urgency. The architecture of bird behavior, the mechanics of cloud formation, the specific question of whether chess was a better model for conflict or cooperation, which produced a debate that lasted 3 sessions and ended without resolution and was better for it. He went to the archive on Shiroko Street less often, and when he went he let Kailindra and Lyriel lead, which they were both fully capable of and which visibly pleased them. He ate lunch with Matsuda and Motohama twice a week and talked about entirely ordinary things and let the ordinariness be restoring rather than boring. He let Akino teach him, as promised, how to receive things. The lesson was, say thank you once, mean it completely, and do not add a qualifier. "Thank you," he practiced. "Good," Akino said. "Thank you? You practiced that one in advance." "Yes. That counts." One January evening, Rias came back from visiting her family. She came directly to the ORC room, which suggested that whatever had happened at home was still with her, and she wanted to be in the space she had built before she had time to put it away. She sat down. She looked at him. "It was easier than I expected," she said. "I thought it would be." Surzex was very proud. He said it 3 times, which is more than he has said anything 3 times in my entire life. A pause. "My father was," she stopped. "My father is not an easy person. He is formal and he values what the family represents more than what its members feel. But when I described the group, and what we had done," he said. She stopped again. "What did he say?" He said, "You sound like your grandmother." He said it as if I had finally arrived somewhere he had been waiting for me to find. Her voice was quiet. "I never met her. She died before I was born." "But she was," Rias looked at the desk, "she was the one who tried to change the faction structures the first time. Before I was born. She made a proposal to the King Council that was rejected, and she spent the rest of her life building the evidence base for the next attempt." "The evidence base Kailindra has been keeping," Issei said slowly. Rias looked at him. "Yes. I did not know until my father told me. Kailindra was in contact with my grandmother for 40 years. She was the outside record keeper for what my grandmother was building inside the faction. Then the project did not start with us, Issei said. It started before we were born, Rias said. We are the next generation of it. They sat with that for a moment. The weight of it, which was not heavy but was very large. Does Kailindra know you know? He asked. I am going to tell her tomorrow. She will be glad. I think so. Rias looked at the desk. I have been thinking about what it means to be part of something that was started before you understood what you were joining. The grandmother I never met. The effort she put in. The record she left. Her voice was careful. She did not know me. She did not know this group. But she built something that we could use. She stopped. She knew someone would come, Issei said. People who build things for the future always do. They do not know who, but they know someone. Rias looked at him. She knew someone would come, she said slowly, tasting the idea. And Kailindra kept the record for 40 years waiting for them. And here we are, he said. She was quiet for a long time. Then she did something she had been doing more often since November. She reached across the desk and put her hand over his. Not briefly, the way she had in the library months ago. She left it there. Here we are, she said. Her hand was warm and the ORC room was warm and outside January was cold and clear and somewhere in the city an archive held 400 years of patient record and a woman who had been waiting for the right people. He turned his hand over. She did not pull hers away. They sat like that for a while, in the particular quiet that needed no words, and the evening outside the window moved toward night. Chapter 37. Kailindra learns about Rias's grandmother. Issei did not go to the archive the next morning. He let Rias go alone. This required some internal negotiation, because his instinct was to be present for difficult conversations in case presence was useful. But he understood that this particular conversation was one Rias needed to have without him, because it was about a lineage that was hers and a history that was hers and a woman he had never met, but she had been missing for all of her life without knowing what she was missing. He went to school. He attended his classes. He drew a small dragon in the margin of his history notes, and thought about grandmothers. Rias came to the ORC room in the afternoon. She sat down. She looked like someone who had set something heavy down, and was still adjusting to the new balance. She cried, Rias said. Kailindra. I did not know she could do that. She has been so consistently, she searched for the word composed. 400 years of carrying something alone, Issei said. And then the person it was built for walks in, she said. Rias stopped. Started again. She said she had not told me because she did not know how much I knew, and she did not want to put the weight of my grandmother's work on my shoulders before I had found my own reason to carry it. She looked at the desk. She said that when you came in October and started building something, she began to think the time was approaching. But she wanted to be sure it was real before she said anything. And now it is real. Now it is real. Rias was quiet for a moment. She also gave me something. She set a small leather journal on the desk between them. It was old, very old, the leather worn in the specific way of something that had been handled by loving hands over a long time. My grandmother's notes, Rias said. From the original proposal. 40 years of thinking about this problem. She looked at the journal. Kailindra has had it since she died. She said she always planned to give it to the right grandmother at the right time. And now is the right time. And now is the right time. He looked at the journal. He did not reach for it. Have you read it? He asked. I am going to. Tonight. Alone. She looked at him. Tomorrow I will tell you what she said. If you want to hear, I want to hear, he said. She picked up the journal and held it against her chest with both hands, the way you held something that was both precious and heavy. And she looked out the window at the January afternoon, and her expression was the most open he had ever seen it, unguarded and moved and entirely herself. Thank you, she said. Not to him specifically. To the room. To the project. To the grandmother who had built something without knowing who would find it. Thank you, he said back. Because it seemed right. Because the things she was thanking deserved more than one voice. The next day she told him what the journal said. It said many things. It said the argument. It said the evidence she had gathered in her lifetime. It said the failures and the near misses and the moments where she had thought it was possible, and then watched it slip away. And at the end, in handwriting that had changed from the beginning to the end of the journal the way handwriting always changed over 40 years, it said, "For whoever finds this, I hope you are not alone. I hope you have built something I could not. I hope the people around you are the kind of people who make impossible things feel possible through the specific quality of being genuinely themselves. And I hope you know, whoever you are, that someone thought about you before you existed and left everything they had for you to use." Rias read it to him from memory. She did not cry. She was past the crying. She read it clearly and completely, and when she finished she looked at him with the expression that was beyond all the others, beyond the revised assessment expression, and the contained wonder expression, and the unguarded expression. It was the expression of someone who had found the thing they had been building toward without knowing its name. "She was writing to you," Issei said quietly. "She was writing to me," Rias said. "And to you. And to all of them." She looked at the journal in her hands. "She could not have known us. But she wrote to us. People who love something always write to the people who will love it next," he said. She looked at him. He looked back. The January light came through the window at the angle that only happened in this month, clear and pale and without warmth but very bright, and in it she was entirely real, entirely herself, and he thought, "I will remember this. I will remember this exactly." The journal and the light and the thing she said and the expression that was past all the others. He would. Chapter 38. February. Training at full power for the first time. Tannen came back in February. He arrived on a Thursday morning without announcement, which was apparently how retired Dragon Kings operated, and he walked into the old gymnasium during the morning training session and stood at the edge of the floor and watched. Issei was in the middle of a training run with the boosted gear at full activation, which meant the gauntlet was blazing red gold and the air around him had the quality it had when something very large was paying very close attention, and the speed and force he was generating would have been, 6 months ago, completely beyond his physical capacity. He stopped when he saw Tannen. "Continue," Tannen said. He continued. The run lasted another 8 minutes. When it was done, he lowered the gear and the blazing settled to its resting warmth, and he walked over to where Tannen was standing and waited. Tannen looked at the gauntlet. Then at Issei. "Drake," he said. Tannen said Drake. In the tone of two very old beings who had a long history and were currently conducting an assessment. "He has developed significantly since November. He has the habit of developing consistently rather than in bursts. It is unusual. Most hosts push too hard too fast," Tannen said to Issei. "They want the power before they have built what the power is meant to amplify." "I know," Issei said. Drake explained the mechanism. Drake has never explained the mechanism to a host before. I asked politely. A sound from Tannen that was not a laugh but was adjacent to it. "Sirzek sent me," he said. "The faction review is proceeding. The other kings have been formally briefed. There is resistance from 2 of them, as expected, but the resistance is engaging with the argument rather than dismissing it." "That is unusual." "That is good," Issei said. "It is progress," Tannen said in the tone of someone who had seen progress fail many times and was therefore precise about what it did and did not mean. "Sirzek wants a secondary presentation. Not to the kings. To their representatives. The advisors and strategists who will be building the actual implementation if it is approved." "When?" "March. In the underworld. He is proposing the Gremory estate as the venue." The gymnasium was quiet except for the sound of the group, who had stopped their own work to listen. "The underworld," Rias said. She was standing near the center of the floor. "He is asking us to come to the underworld. He is inviting you," Tannen said. "There is a difference." "Yes," she said. "I know." She looked at the group. "All of us?" "The invitation is for the group," Tannen said. He looked around the gymnasium, at all of them. At Tosca's extended wings and Karama's 9 tails and Stella's starlit eyes and Sable's shadow and Myra's 4 arms and Lyriel's fully extended ears. He was specific about that. He said, "The argument is only as convincing as the people making it." "He means us," Myra said slowly. "We are the evidence." "You are," Tannen agreed. "Every one of you is proof that the system is wrong and that something better is not only possible but already existing." The gymnasium held the silence of that for a moment. "We will go," Issei said. "For the group," which had become what he could say things for without needing to ask first, because he knew them well enough to know. One by one they nodded. Even Sable, from the edge of the gymnasium where they tended to position themselves, gave their small, precise inclination of the head. March, Issei confirmed. March, Tannen said. He looked at Issei with the long assessment of a dragon who had lived for an enormous amount of time, and was revising his estimate upward. You should know, he said, that Drake has not spoken to me about a host before. In all the centuries. I did not have anything to say about the previous hosts, Drake said. And about this one? A warm pulse from the gauntlet. This one, Drake said, with the particular gravity of something ancient being entirely sincere, is worth saying things about. Tannen looked at Issei for another moment. Then he nodded once, with the weight of a former dragon king, and it felt like being seen by something older than the school and the city and most of the history either of them had been taught. Good, Tannen said. And left. Chapter 39. What the group looks like from outside. Sona Citri asked Issei a question in the second week of February that he had not been asked before. She asked it in the student council room, where she had been working late on the annual budget review, and he had stopped by with a cup of tea because he had noticed, going past, that her light was on at 9 in the evening, and she had the expression through the window of someone who had been in the same position for too long. She accepted the tea. She looked at the budget. She looked at him. What do you think the group looks like from outside? She asked. What do you mean? I mean, to someone who does not know any of you personally. A faction representative. A king's advisor. Someone who is going to walk into a room in March and see 10 people from various supernatural backgrounds, a 16-year-old with a heavenly dragon's sacred gear, a 400-year-old archivist, and a letter from the Lucifer requesting formal consideration of structural reform. What does that look like? He thought about it. Surprising, he said. More specifically, like something that has not been organized from the top down. Most faction politics is top down. This came from the middle. From people who exist in the system and found each other without institutional support, which is either reassuring or threatening, depending on the observer's relationship to institutional structures, Sona said. Yes. The advisors who will be in that room in March have spent their careers maintaining institutional structures. They will read this as a challenge. Some of them will, he said. The ones who experience the structure as something they protect rather than something they use. How do we address that? He thought about it for a long moment. We do not address it directly, he said. Addressing it directly confirms their reading. We address it by demonstrating that what we have built is not a challenge to the structure but an extension of it. The argument is that the structure is incomplete. We are not trying to replace it. We are trying to finish it. Sona was quiet for a moment. Finish it, she said slowly. The faction structures were built to provide stability and protection. They succeeded in doing that for the people they were built around. The representation proposal does not ask those structures to change their purpose. It asks them to include more people in the purpose they already have. Which is a fundamentally conservative argument, she said. You are not asking them to change what they value. You are asking them to apply what they already value more consistently. Exactly. She looked at him. You worked this out when? I have been working on it since December, he said. You just gave me the language to say it cleanly. We are useful to each other, she said, with the dry satisfaction of someone making a correct observation. We are, he agreed. She turned back to the budget. The framing for March needs to reflect this. I will rewrite the opening section of the presentation to lead with the conservative argument. The extension framing rather than the reform framing. That would be helpful. I know. She paused. You should go home. It is late. So should you. I have 6 more pages of this budget. The budget will still be wrong tomorrow, he said. Go home, Citri-senpai. She looked at him. Something in her precise expression shifted fractionally toward amusement. You are 16. I am 16 and I am right. Unfortunately, yes. She closed the budget folder. Good night, Hayate. Good night, he said. He walked home under the February stars, which were cold and very clear, and thought about conservative arguments, and the extension of structures, and the way the most radical thing you could sometimes do was ask a system to be consistent with itself. Chapter 40. The things they carry to March. The last weeks before March were a particular kind of busy. Not the urgent busy of October and November, when there were threats and operations and the sense of something bearing down. This was the sustained busy of preparation, rehearsal and refinement, and the thousand small tasks that were not interesting individually but were, collectively, what made the difference between something that worked and something that almost worked. Issei managed it the way he managed everything, by understanding the system and working within it efficiently, and saving his energy for the parts that required genuine thought. The parts that required genuine thought were mostly relational. Tosca had been exchanging letters with her family since December. The letters had gone from difficult to complicated to something that was approaching, if not warmth, then at least the kind of honest exchange that warmth could grow from. She showed Issei one of them in the second week of February. Her mother's handwriting, careful and formal, describing the Dragon Court's reaction to the news that their bloodline representative was part of a faction reform proposal. She is proud, Tosca said. She will not say it directly because that is not how we say things. But the word she used for what I have done is, she translated from the Dragon Court language with the slight pause of someone finding the closest equivalent, it means both honor and rightness. That you have done the thing that was yours to do, that is the right word, Issei said. Yes. She folded the letter. She wants to come in the summer. To see where I am. Will you let her? Yes. Without hesitation. I want her to see Ko. I want her to see the ORC room and the archive in Kalindra, who she has heard of. The dragon community is aware of the archivist in the way you are aware of a significant geological feature, present and permanent, and occasionally causing phenomena. She paused. I want her to meet you. He looked at her. She was looking at the letter with the particular Tosca expression that was not quite a smile, but contained several. I would be glad to meet her, he said. The near smile completed itself. He had stopped filing those away. He just let them be what they were. Karama received a response to the communication she had sent her family in December. Her family was complicated, which she had mentioned in passing in October and in more detail in the document. They had not known where she was for 6 months, which was the duration of the undercover operation, and the not knowing had been its own kind of damage. The response was long. She read it in the small study room she still used, with the door closed, for 2 hours. Then she came to the ORC room and sat in her corner, and was quiet for a while. Issei brought her tea. He set it beside her and sat nearby and did not ask. My aunt, she said eventually, wants to come to the presentation in March. She is, Karama stopped, and something in her voice was careful with the specific care of people navigating things that are both wonderful and complicated. She has been very involved in the supernatural community advocacy networks for 20 years. She has been doing, in her sphere, something adjacent to what we have been building. She will be useful in March, Issei said. Yes. She will. A pause. She also wants to see me. Of course she does. I have not seen my family in 8 months, Karama said. No. I did not know how much I had missed them until I started writing back and realized how much there was to say. That is usually when you know, he said. When the words come faster than you expected. She looked at him over her tea. Is that true for you? With your family? He thought about his parents. His mother who packed him lunch and asked about school. His father who read history books in the evening and left them on the kitchen table for Issei to find. The ordinary, complete warmth of people who had given him exactly what he needed without knowing what he would need it for. Yes, he said. I am going to tell them more in the spring. When the presentation is done, and I have the words for all of it. They deserve to know what their ordinary house has been part of. They will be proud, Karama said. I think so. Good. She drank her tea. Good. Sable told the group something on the last Thursday before March. They told it in the way they told things, standing near the wall, with their shadow pulled in precisely, speaking at normal volume with the specific calm of someone who had decided to say a thing and was doing it without preamble. I have been alone for most of my life, they said. The shadow weaving makes it difficult. Spaces designed for people who occupy a single layer do not accommodate me easily, and people who are not used to someone existing in the in-between tend to find it. They paused, uncomfortable. I learned to move through the world without leaving impressions. It seemed safer. Nobody said anything. They knew, by this point, when Sable was pausing and when Sable was done. I am not doing that here, they said. I want you to know that I am aware of it, and I am not doing it. I am leaving impressions. The shadow under the wall shifted slightly, a small and deliberate thing. This room has my shape in it now. The space knows I have been here. Issei looked at the wall. It was true, the corner Sable occupied had a quality now that was not simply shadow. Something more intentional. The impression of a person who was present and knew it. We know you have been here, Lyriel said simply. Yes, said Mira. The space always knows, said Stella, from the floor. Sable was quiet for a moment. Then good. Just that. But it was the fullest one-word sentence Issei had heard from them, and it contained, in its single syllable, an entire person finding their correct size. Chapter 41. The night the stars are very loud. 2 nights before March, Stella woke up. This was unusual. Stella's sleep, when she slept, was deep and complete and ended at a time determined by whatever celestial calculation governed her rest. She did not wake in the middle of it, but at 2 in the morning, 11 days before the presentation, she sat up on the ORC room couch where she had fallen asleep after a late session, and her starlit eyes were blazing, which they had never done before, and she was very still with the specific stillness of someone receiving a great deal of information very quickly. Kaneko, who had been reading in the chair across the room because Kaneko did not always sleep at normal hours, looked up. Stella, the stars, Stella said. Her voice was different, lower, more resonant, as though it was carrying something larger than her usual speaking register. Something is moving. Very old. Very large. It has been watching us the way stars watch things, from very far away, and it has, she stopped. It has decided to move. What is it? Kaneko said. I do not have a category for it. It is not any of the factions. It is not any creature I have a trajectory for. She looked at the ceiling. It is old enough that it was here before the factions were established. Before the boundary. Before most of what we know. Dangerous? Kaneko asked. Not inherently. But large. The movement of something this large changes everything around it. Kaneko sent the message to Issei, who was home and asleep. He was in the ORC room in 20 minutes. Stella was still on the couch. The blazing in her eyes had not diminished. She was sitting in the posture of someone reading at high speed, which for her meant completely still with internal motion that was invisible from outside. Issei sat across from her. Tell me what you see. It has been watching since the beginning, she said. Since October? I did not see it then because it was so far away that it registered as background. Like trying to see an individual star in daylight, the sun is too bright and the star is there but invisible. What changed? We moved closer to it. The presentation, the March meeting, the underworld, all of it constitutes movement towards something that this entity has been positioned near for a very long time. She looked at him. It is not a threat. I am certain of that. The trajectory is not hostile. But it is, she searched, it is interested. In us. In specifically what we have built, and why. What do you think it is? Issei said. She was quiet for a moment. The starlight in her eyes slowed, which meant she was considering rather than processing. My mother, she said, had a name for a category of being that was old enough to predate categorization. She called them antecedents. The things that were here before the things that named things. She looked at him. She said if I ever encountered one, I should not be afraid, because antecedents did not interact with what they were not interested in, and being interesting to one was the highest possible compliment. And this one is interested in us. In you, she said. Specifically? In what you have done. Drake had been warm since Issei arrived. Now the warmth intensified. DDRIG, Issei said. I know, Drake said. In the specific tone of something very old encountering something older. Do you know what it is? There are things that were here before I was. I have not encountered them often. They are, a pause, not easily described. Are we safe? Yes. Stella is correct. The interest is not hostile. It is, another pause, evaluative. Like someone reading a book they have been waiting a long time to find. Issei thought about that. About being a book that something ancient had been waiting to find. Should we do anything? He asked Stella. No, she said. I think we simply continue. What we are doing is what drew its attention. The best response is to keep doing it. Then we keep doing it, he said. Stella's eyes gradually quieted back to their usual slow rotation. She looked at him with a clarity that was more than her usual clarity, the specific brightness of someone who has seen a very large thing and is still carrying the scale of it. My mother would have had so much to say about tonight, she said. She would have, he agreed. What do you think she would say? Stella smiled. The small, exact smile that rearranged her face. I think she would say good. You found the ones worth finding. Now don't waste it. We will not, he said. No, she said. We will not. Kaneko made tea, because it was 3 in the morning and that was what you did. They sat in the warm quiet of the ORC room until the stars outside began to fade into the early gray of morning, and none of them felt like going home. Chapter 42. The day before. The day before the presentation had a particular texture. Not tense, exactly. Full. The way a breath felt full just before you used it for something important. The group gathered in the ORC room in the morning, not because there was anything left to prepare but because the room was where they had built everything, and it seemed like the right place to be the day before the building was tested. Kailindra came. She sat in the chair near the chess set that had become hers and she looked around the room with her amber eyes and she said, I have been waiting for a day like tomorrow for most of my adult life. Nobody had anything to add to that, because it contained everything. Silvara had come from the forest court for the presentation. She sat beside Lyria with the natural ease of a mother who had made peace with the size her daughter had grown to and was glad of it. Lyria's ears were fully extended and Silvara's were too, and they were talking about the resonance index system with the quiet intensity of two people who shared a specific kind of mind. Karama's Anne had arrived the day before. Her name was Hannah and she had 9 tails like Karama, slightly older in their silver tips, and she had been told about Issei in advance by Karama, and had arrived looking at him with the particular assessment of someone who has been given high expectations, and is verifying them in person. She verified them in approximately 3 minutes and then said to Karama, in a voice that was not quite low enough to be private, You were right. I am often right, Karama said. About this you are especially right, Hannah said, and went to introduce herself to Sona, because she had been told about Sona's family connections and was already thinking about the post-presentation political landscape. In the afternoon, people dispersed to their individual preparations. Issei walked. He walked through Ko the way he had walked it since October, the routes he knew and the ones he had discovered since, the path past the shrine where Rainier had appeared, the park where the plan had worked, the archive on Shiroko Street, the school gate with the crows. He walked, and he thought about nothing in particular, which was how he rested when the Kaneko method of active resting did not work. He let the city be around him. He let the March afternoon be cold and clear and the specific color of late winter, gray-white sky, bare trees with the first suggestion of bud at the tips, the particular smell of a world that was about to start again. He ended up at the gate. The crow was there. It had always been there. He had seen it in October before any of this started, looking at him from the fence post with the particular crow philosophy of patient observation. He had seen it through all of it, at intervals, never threatening, never signaling, simply present. He looked at the crow. The crow looked at him. I do not know what you are, he said, which was the honest thing. The crow tilted its head. It did not answer, because it was a crow, or because whatever it was did not communicate in words, or because the answer was not one that required saying. Thank you for watching, he said anyway. The crow spread its wings. Not to fly, not immediately. Just spread them, the full black span of them, in the late winter light. Then it folded them and sat still. Issei nodded once, the way you nodded at something you understood but could not explain, and went home to sleep before the most important day of the year. He sat with his parents at dinner. His mother had made katsu, which was his favorite, which she had made for important days since he was 6 years old. He had not told her tomorrow was important. She had made it anyway. He ate and talked about ordinary things and felt the particular love of people who gave you exactly what you needed without needing to be asked and without needing credit for it. After dinner his father found him in the kitchen and said, without preamble, the way his father said things, "You seem like someone on the edge of something." "Tomorrow is a big day," Issei said. "What kind?" "The kind where you find out if the thing you have been building works the way you thought it would." His father looked at him. He was a quiet man who had read history books his whole life and had the particular perspective of someone who had spent a lot of time with large narratives and could identify when someone was inside one. "Whatever it is," he said, "you have built it well. I can tell that without knowing what it is." "How?" "Because you have been the same person through it. Some things change the people building them. You have only become more yourself." Issei looked at his father. "Thank you," he said. "Once. Completely. Without a qualifier." His father nodded. He went back to his book. Issei went to bed. He slept well and dreamed of nothing and woke at dawn with the particular clarity of a person ready to be in the day. Chapter 43. March. The Underworld. What was built? The underworld was not what anyone in the human world imagined it to be. It was not dark, for one thing. The light was different from human world light, warmer and more diffuse, with a quality that reminded Issei of late afternoon in autumn. The Gremry estate was large in the way that places built over centuries were large, not ostentatiously but structurally, each addition made in response to a genuine need and therefore fitting naturally with what was already there. Serzex received them in the main hall. He looked like himself, tall, red-haired, wearing the expression of someone who had been working very hard for several months on something he genuinely believed in and was about to find out if the work had been enough. He looked at the group as they arrived. His eyes moved to Rias. She was wearing the full regalia of the Gremriere for the first time in Issei's memory, the formal clothing of her house, and she wore it the way she wore everything now, not as a role but as an expression of something she had decided to own fully. Serzex looked at his sister for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, in a voice that was entirely the brother and entirely the Lucifer simultaneously, "You look like her." Rias understood. "Yes," she said. "I know." He held her gaze for another moment. Then he turned to the group and became, efficiently and completely, the Lucifer. "The representatives are in the East Hall," he said. 14 advisors representing all 4 kings, including 2 from the kings who are currently skeptical. Tannen will be present. Grafia has reviewed your presentation and confirms it is ready. You have 2 hours. 2 hours, Issei said. It is sufficient, Serzex said. He looked at Issei with the blue-green eyes. I have read your grandmother's journal, he said to Rias, but he was still looking at Issei. The argument she built over 40 years. The record she kept. He paused. And I have read what you built in 6 months. And I want you to know that she would have found the comparison, he searched for the word, satisfying. Rias made a sound. Small and complete. Issei looked at Serzex. We are ready, he said. The East Hall held 14 people who had spent their careers in the faction structures and knew those structures better than almost anyone alive. They looked at the group from Ko with the assessment of expertise, precise, thorough, looking for the places where the argument could be pressured. Issei stood at the front of the room and did not feel pressure. He felt ready. He presented the argument the way he had built it, from the foundation up. The systems evidence first. The friction reduction model. The stability analysis. Kalindra's 4 centuries of documentation, presented not as sentiment but as data. The Prague incident, as preventive context. Then Rias presented the legal framework. The historical precedent for revision. The mechanism for implementation that Sona had helped design. Then Sona presented the political architecture, how the extension could proceed without requiring any existing faction to cede authority, because it was not about removing power but about covering ground that was currently unprotected. The room was attentive. Not warm, not yet. But attentive in the way of people who were engaging with the argument rather than waiting for it to be over. Then Issei said, I want to introduce the people in this room. He did. He introduced Tosca, Dragon Bloodline, hybrid currently enrolled in school, translating documents older than the current writing system for the Archives Preservation Project. He said it plainly, as a fact, And then he said what she had done in October, and why, and that she had made a choice with full understanding of the consequences. He introduced Stella, Celestial Navigator, her mother's life work, the 3-year trajectory reading that had preceded their meeting. He said what she had contributed to the investigation and to the understanding of the antecedent observation the night before, and he let the word antecedent land with the weight it had. He introduced Kurama, Nine-Tailed Kitsune, former operative who had found a conscience and acted on it at significant personal risk. He described the document she had written and let them know that copies were available for any representative who wanted to understand what the current system looked like from inside the gap. He introduced Sable, Shadow Weaver, unclassifiable in the current system, present in the space between spaces. He said that Sable had been alone for most of their life, and that what they had found in Ko was the first experience of not having to choose between existing and belonging. He introduced Lyriel, High Court Elf, whose family had been arguing for formal representation for 3 generations. He said that her grandmother and Rias's grandmother had been working toward the same thing from different angles, and that the journal from one and the archive from the other were sitting in the same building, and that history had a way of continuing even when the people who built it did not live to see its continuation. He introduced Mira, Sea Chimera, scholar, architect of theoretical structures that did not yet exist but would, someday, be built by someone who had read her work. He introduced Kailindra. He said 400 years? He let that number be what it was, and then he stopped. He looked at the 14 advisors. These are not examples, he said. These are people. Specific, individual people, each of whom has a story I have not fully told because 2 hours is not enough to tell all of it. But the fraction I have told should be enough to demonstrate that the system's failure to account for them is not a small administrative gap. It is a structural absence that has consequences measured in individual lives, over generations, without end, unless something changes. The room was quiet. One of the skeptical advisors, an older devil with the specific face of someone who had been in rooms like this for a very long time, said, "The implementation mechanism." "Here," Sona said, and produced the framework. And then there were questions. The questions lasted an hour and 40 minutes. They were precise and probing, and several of them were designed to find the weakness in the argument, which was appropriate, because a proposal that could not survive precise questions did not deserve to proceed. Issei answered all of them. When he did not know the specific answer, he said so and directed the question to the person in the room who did know. Kailindra answered 7 questions, and each one was answered with the depth of 4 centuries of knowledge, and the room's quality changed each time she spoke, subtly, as the weight of what she represented settled. Near the end, the older skeptical advisor asked, "What do you want the outcome of this meeting to be?" "I want you to take the proposal to the kings with a recommendation for formal consideration," Issei said. "Not approval. Consideration. I want the kings to engage with the argument on its merits with the full understanding of what they are deciding. You are not asking for a yes. I am asking for a real conversation. Yes follows from that if the argument is sound. I believe it is sound. But the conversation has to happen first." The advisor looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "The argument is sound." She said it simply, as a statement of her assessment, not as a vote. But in the room, it landed like one. The second skeptical advisor looked at his notes. "I will take it to the king with a recommendation for formal engagement," he said. "That is not a commitment to approval." "I know," Issei said. "Thank you." "Do not thank me. If the argument is this sound, thank it." "The argument is sound because the people who built it are real," Issei said. "I will thank them." After the East Hall had emptied and the group was in the courtyard of the Gremery estate in the underworld afternoon light, which was warm and amber and fell on all of them with the particular generosity of a good light. Nobody said anything for a while. They did not need to. Rias was standing near the garden wall. She was looking at the light. Serzex had gone with the advisors to the follow-up discussion, which he had said would last several more hours and which Rias was not required to attend. She was simply standing in the light of the estate she had grown up in, and she was the fullest version of herself Issei had ever seen. He stood beside her. "2 of them will recommend formal engagement," he said. "I know. I heard. That is more than we needed. I know." She turned to look at him. The amber light caught her hair and her eyes, and she was looking at him with the expression that was past all the others, the one he had memorized in January. And it was the same expression, and it was larger. "We did it," she said. "We started it," he said. "There is still work. I know." A pause. "We started it." He looked at her. The light. The estate. The sound of the group behind them. Karama's dry voice, Myra's bright laugh, Tosca's low response to something, Stella on the grass looking at a sky full of different stars than the ones she was used to, Sable's shadow long and deliberate in the afternoon gold, Lyriel and her mother side by side with extended ears, Kailindra sitting on the bench with the expression of someone who had been patient for 400 years and could afford to be patient a little longer. Kaneko was eating something. She was always eating something after significant events, which Issei had decided was either a coping mechanism or a celebration mechanism, and possibly both. Sona was making notes, because Sona made notes at all times, including immediately after historical presentations in underworld estates. Aquino was looking at him and smiling, the real smile, the one that knew everything. "Issei," Ria said. "Yes. I have something to say." "Then say it." She looked at him with the fullness of everything that had accumulated since October. The library and the research and the midnight letters and the hand over his and the January light and the grandmother's journal and all of it. The entire long building of a thing that had started as a question in the chest of a boy who thought he was ordinary. "You are the most important person I have met," she said. Not as she had said it in November, as a revelation. As a fact she had been carrying for months and had decided to say in the afternoon light of the place she had come from. "I know," he said. And then, "You are the same for me." She looked at him. He looked back. The amber light was very warm. "What do we do with that?" she said. "We keep building," he said. "And we let it be what it is." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, the one that was not the gauntlet, and held it, and did not let go. He did not let go either. "Well said, Drake." "Quiet," Issei said. "I was going to say well in the approving sense." "I know." Still quiet. "Fine." Rias laughed. Issei smiled. Behind them, Aquino made a sound of satisfaction that she had been saving for exactly this moment. Karama, who had observed the whole thing, turned to her aunt and said something in Kitsune tongue that made Hana cover her smile with a hand. Tosca, who had also observed, looked at Mira. Mira looked at Tosca. Myra's upper two arms spread slightly in the chimeric gesture that meant, obvious. Tosca's near smile completed itself. Stella was on the grass looking at the underworld sky. "The stars here are different," she said, to no one in particular. "But they tell the same story." "What story?" Lyriel asked. "The same one they always tell," Stella said. "That things were built. That things continue. That the people who were here before us made something we could use. And that we are," she looked at all of them with her starlit eyes bright in the amber light, "exactly where we were always going to be." Sable's shadow moved. It spread out from the bench where they sat, slowly, fully, into all the available space, no longer careful or contained, just present. "Yes," Sable said. Quietly. "With everything." The afternoon continued. The light was warm. The underworld had different stars and the same story, and 10 people who had found each other in a city in autumn and built something that had no name yet but would have one. Kailindra looked at it from her bench with her amber eyes and her 400 years. She looked at it for a long time. Then she opened her journal, which she had brought, because she always brought it, and she began to write. The first line she wrote was, "Finally." The second was, "And it is better than I imagined." The third was, "They are worth all of it." She wrote for a long time in the amber light, while around her the group was alive and present, and entirely itself, and the story continued, as stories did, into the long and necessary space of what came next. Chapter 44. Coming Home. The return journey from the underworld took place through a transportation array in the lower level of the Gremery estate, a circle of inscribed stone that hummed with old purpose and deposited them, in a sequence of gentle displacement, back in the basement of Kailindra's archive on Shiroko Street. It was late evening in Ko. The archive smelled of cedar and old paper and something electric, as it always did, and the contrast between the warm amber light of the underworld afternoon and the cool blue-gray of a Japanese March evening was complete and immediate. Several people stood still for a moment, just absorbing the difference. Different light, Tosca said. Different light, Stella agreed. She was looking at the ceiling with her starlit eyes, already recalibrating to the familiar star positions of home. But the same story. She said it with the particular satisfaction of a navigator confirming a position. Kailindra was the last through. She stepped off the array with the practiced ease of someone who had made this particular transition many times over many centuries and had long since stopped finding it remarkable. She looked at the group gathered in the outer room of her archive, all of them slightly displaced in the specific way of people who had just done something large and were processing the return to ordinary space. Tea, she said, not as a question, and went to put the kettle on. They stayed for 2 hours. Not because there was work to do. The work was done, or the first significant phase of it was done, and the remaining work was the long, sustained kind that could not be rushed, and would not be resolved tonight. They stayed because the archive had become, over the past months, the place where important things settled properly, and this was an important thing that needed settling. Karama's Aunt Hannah stayed too. She sat beside Karama with their tails overlapping in the way that Issei had come to understand was a kitsune expression of proximity that was more specific than sitting close, and she looked around the archive with the slow assessment of someone archiving her own memory of a moment. 40 years in the advocacy networks, she said to Kailindra, who was sitting across from her. And I have never seen a presentation that moved 2 skeptics in a single session. The argument was stronger than most, Kailindra said. The argument was made by people who lived it, Hannah said. That is different from an argument made by people who studied it. The advisors knew the difference. They did, Kailindra agreed. She looked at Issei, who was sitting at the end of the table with his tea and the particular stillness of someone who had used a great deal of energy, and was now allowing himself to be still. You introduced them individually, she said. That was not in the prepared presentation. No, he said. When did you decide to do it? When I walked into the room and saw 14 people who had spent their careers reading political arguments, and needed to understand that this was not one. Hannah looked at him. You read the room in the first 30 seconds and changed the strategy. I read the room and used the strategy we had always had. The argument is that these are people, not examples. The room needed to see that before they could hear the rest of it. Most presenters would have been afraid to deviate from the prepared text, Hannah said. Most presenters had not spent 6 months knowing these people, he said simply. Hannah looked at Karama. Karama looked back. Something passed between them that was entirely kitsune and entirely private and ended with Hannah giving a small, decisive nod of the kind that meant a long-held assessment had just been confirmed. Liriel and her mother walked back to the school together through the March evening. Issei watched them go from the archive steps and thought about the particular shape of a mother and daughter who had found each other again on the other side of a distance that had been necessary, and was now resolved. Savara had said something to him before they left. She had come to where he was standing near the door, and she had looked at him with the amber eyes that Liriel had inherited, and she said, in the forest court we have a saying. The tree that grows in good soil does not know what it owes the soil. You are the soil. He had not known what to say to that either. He seemed to encounter things he did not know how to respond to with increasing frequency, which Aquino had told him was a sign that the things being said were true enough to require more than words. I am glad she is here, he said to Silvara. As am I, she said. More than I knew how to say before I came. She had walked away with her daughter into the March evening, and Issei had stood on the archive steps and thought about soil and trees and the particular invisible work of being the ground something grew from. You appear to be processing something, Drake said. I am thinking about how to receive a compliment, Issei said. Aquino has been working on that with you. She has. I am making progress. What is your current approach? Say thank you once, mean it completely, and do not add a qualifier. And did you? I said I am glad she is here. Which is not thank you, but it is the thing I actually meant. A warm pulse. That, Drake said, with the tone of a dragon who had been watching humans for 1400 years and had specific opinions. I asked better than thank you. Yes, Issei agreed. I think it is. Chapter 45. The morning after, and what it contains. The morning after the presentation, Issei went to school. This was not remarkable. He had been going to school through everything, through October's fallen angel and November's 4 agents and December's documentation and January's archive sessions and February's training and the entire accumulating weight of the past 6 months. School had been the consistent background of all of it, the ordinary framework within which extraordinary things had been built, and he had found, repeatedly, that maintaining the ordinary was not a burden but a resource. It kept him grounded in the scale of things. It kept him connected to the people who were not part of the project. He sat in the second row of his homeroom class and looked at the board and thought, yesterday I was in the underworld. Today there is a quiz on the Meiji Restoration. Both were real. Both required his attention. He gave each one what it needed. Rosweiss-sensei called on him 3 times during the lecture, which was more than usual, and each time he answered correctly, and the 3rd time she looked at him over the top of her attendance book with the expression of someone who had been watching him all year and had been adding things up. After class she asked him to stay. He stayed. She waited until the room emptied. She set her attendance book on the desk. She looked at him with the direct attention of someone who did not waste words. You have been doing something important this year, she said. I have been attending school, he said. You have been attending school and doing something important. Both simultaneously, which most people cannot manage. She paused. I am not asking what it is. I am telling you that I have noticed. He looked at her. Rosweiss-sensei was not an ordinary teacher, and he had known this since the first week of school, when she had arrived with the slightly surprised expression of someone adjusting to a new situation and the underlying quality of someone who was extraordinarily capable, and very good at appearing less so. He had classified her early as someone worth paying attention to. He had paid attention. He had noticed things about her that he had not mentioned, because it was not his to mention. You are not entirely human, he said. Carefully. Not as an accusation. She was very still for a moment. No, she said, equally carefully. You do not have to tell me what you are, he said. I am not asking. I am a Valkyrie, she said. Former. The former part is complicated. I am here because I needed somewhere to be while the complication resolved. A pause. I was not expecting a student to notice. I notice most things, he said. I just do not always say them. I am aware of that. She looked at him. The Gremry heiress. The Citri heiress. The ORC room in the old building. I have been aware of the situation here since September. I made a deliberate choice to observe rather than involve myself. Why? Because what you were building did not need another adult's management. It needed to be built by the people building it. She paused. I have been watching in case something went wrong that required intervention. Nothing did. He thought about that. About the Valkyrie who had been quietly watching from the second row of homeroom, grading attendance books and asking about the Warring States period and keeping a guardian distance she had never mentioned. Thank you, he said. Do not thank me. I did very little. You were there, he said. In case it was needed. That is not very little. She looked at him for a moment. Then she made a mark in her attendance book. He had learned, months ago, that the mark meant she had updated her internal assessment of a student. She updated it now. He thought the mark was probably the highest one she had. He told Rias about Rosweiss-sensei that afternoon. She listened with the focused attention she brought to new information and then said, I knew she was not entirely human. I did not know what she was. Valkyrie. Former. She said the former part is complicated. It usually is, with Valkyries who leave the service. Rias looked at the ORC room window. We should invite her. When she is ready. Yes, he said. You already thought so. I have thought so since October. She has been watching over us all year. That kind of investment deserves an open door. Rias looked at him. The expression that was past all the others, which he had seen in the underworld afternoon, and which had become, over the weeks since, the expression she wore most often when she looked at him. As though it had finally settled into its permanent position. When the time is right, she said. When the time is right, he agreed. She reached across the desk. He reached back. Their hands met in the middle, easy and familiar, the way things were easy and familiar when they had been built slowly and well. Chapter 46. Aquino writes the letter. The letter to Barakiel was written on a Tuesday evening in the third week of March. Akino had been thinking about it since January. She had told Issei she would write it in the new year, and then the new year had been full of the submission and the preparation and the presentation, and the letter had been in the back of her mind the way important things waited when they were not urgent, present, patient, not pressing but not going away. After the presentation she found she had room for it. She wrote it alone in her room, which was the right place for it, alone, without an audience, because this was a private thing and privacy was appropriate. But she told Issei she was going to write it that evening, which was the commitment mechanism she had used in January, and which had worked then. He sent her a message at 9 in the morning. I know. You can do this. She wrote back, I know I can. I just needed someone else to know I was doing it. He wrote back, I know. The letter took 3 hours. She had not expected 3 hours. She had thought perhaps 1, perhaps less, because she had been thinking about it for months, and the thinking had done the preparatory work. But the thinking, it turned out, had been preparation for the feeling, and the feeling was larger than she had expected, and she sat with it, and let it be the correct size before she tried to put it in words. She did not write the difficult parts first, which was what she had always done with things she was afraid of. Lead with the hardest part, get it done, not allow herself to work up to it, and then back away. She led with the hardest part. The hardest part was, I do not blame you for what happened to my mother. It was true. She had arrived at it over years, through the specific work of someone deciding what they actually believed rather than what they were supposed to believe, and she had known it was true for a long time. But she had not said it to him. It existed as a fact that she held, privately, and it had never traveled to the person it was most for. She wrote it. She wrote everything after it. The letter was 3 pages. It said what she had needed to say since she was young and had not had the language for, or the safety for, or the sufficient stillness in herself for. It said what she actually felt and what she actually wanted, which was not a reunion and not an erasure of history and not a simple resolution of something that was not simple. It was a beginning, she wrote. If he wanted one. She was not owed his wanting it. But she was offering it. She gave it to Issei the next morning to read. Not for editing. For witnessing. He read it carefully. He set it down. It says exactly what you mean, he said. Yes. It does not say more than you mean or less. No. It is the right letter, he said. She looked at the envelope in her hands. I know. I needed to hear it from someone else. Send it, he said. She sent it that afternoon, through the supernatural postal system that Rias had explained once, and that was exactly as improbable as it sounded, and the letter traveled in the direction of a fallen angel who had lost something years ago, and had not known there was a door until one appeared. Then Aquino went back to the ORC room and sat in her chair and held her tea and allowed herself to be quiet for a while, which she had been practicing under Issei's tutelage, and which still required practice but was getting easier. The quiet, she was finding, was not empty. It was full of the particular substance of things completed. The reply came in 11 days. She received it on a Wednesday morning, a sealed envelope that materialized in the ORC room with the specific shimmer of fallen angel transmission. She looked at it for a long time before she opened it. She opened it alone. She read it alone. She came to the ORC room afterward with the expression of someone who had just received something very large and was carrying it carefully. He wants to meet, she said. Not immediately. When I am ready. He said. She stopped. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness was the deliberate kind. He said he had been waiting to hear that. I did not blame him. He said he had been carrying the opposite assumption for 18 years. He said. Another stop, longer. He said that he would wait as long as I needed and that there was no version of this where he was not grateful I wrote. The room was quiet. That is a good letter, Lyriel said softly. Yes, Aquino said. It is. She folded it and held it. I am going to wait a little. Process this. Then I will think about meeting. There is no rush, Issei said. No. She looked at him. There is not. And that is, she paused, new. For a long time everything about this felt urgent and impossible simultaneously. And now it just feels, she searched for the word, available. Like something I can approach at the right pace. That is the best kind of available, he said. She looked at him with a real smile. You are getting better at receiving things, she said. You are also getting better at giving things in the specific way that stays with a person. Is that different from regular giving? It is the version that does not ask for anything back, she said. Most giving carries weight. The thing you give carries the implicit expectation that it will be noted, or reciprocated, or at minimum acknowledged as significant. Yours does not. I give it because it is true, he said. Truth does not need anything back. She looked at him for a long moment. No, she said. It does not. But people are not used to that. It takes adjustment. How is the adjustment going? She smiled. We are all, she said, gesturing at the room, the group, the accumulated months of it, considerably adjusted. Chapter 47. Spring and the Things That Grow. April came to Ko in the specific way April came, decisively, with cherry blossoms and the smell of wet earth and the quality of light that did not exist in any other month, angled and pale and somehow both cool and warm simultaneously. The trees along the school path bloomed in the first week. The students moved through the blossoms the way they always did, some noticing and some not, and Issei walked through them every morning and let them be simply beautiful without needing them to mean anything. He had been working on that. On letting things be what they were without requiring them to be useful. It was harder than it sounded. The faction review was proceeding. Sirzek sent updates through Graphia at intervals that suggested a man managing a complex political situation with the care of someone who knew that the difference between a proposal that passed and one that failed was often timing rather than merit. The two advisors who had committed to recommending formal engagement had done so. The formal engagement process had begun. There were 3 more stages before a vote, each with its own timeline and its own set of conversations to be had. Months, Ria said, reading the latest update. Possibly into summer. We always knew it would take time, Issei said. I know. I am not impatient. She set the update down. I am tracking it. There is a difference. There is, he agreed. She looked at him with a settled expression. You are less focused on the review than I expected. The review is in the right hands. There is nothing I can do to make it move faster that would not make it move worse. He looked at the board, which had been partially cleared for the first time since November. I am thinking about what comes after. After the vote? After the vote, yes. But also the things happening now that are adjacent to the project but separate from it. Raswai-sensei. The protocol reform contact Kailindra introduced. Myra's capstone work, which has implications beyond the Chimeric Academy. The building Mira designed is theoretical now, but it should not always be theoretical. Rias looked at him. You are building the next thing. I am building what grows from this thing, he said. The project was never going to end at the vote. The vote is a door. What matters is what we do on the other side. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I have been thinking about that too. About what the Gremory family can do, specifically, when the formal protections are in place. Resources? Networks. Making the protections real rather than just structural. That is exactly the right next step, he said. I know. I have also been thinking, she said, more carefully, about what I want. Personally. Beyond the project. He looked at her. I have spent most of my life building toward things that were assigned to me, she said. The peerage. The rating games. The family responsibilities. I chose them, but I chose them from the options I was given rather than from the full range of what might be possible. She looked at the window. I am thinking about what I would choose if I started from the beginning with the full range. What do you find when you look? She was quiet for a long moment. April light through the window, cherry blossoms moving in the breeze outside, the ORC room warm and the chess set mid-game on the side table. This, she said. This room. This group. The work. And a pause that was not quite a pause because she said the next part without stopping, just at a different weight, you. He held her gaze. Good, he said. In the way he had learned to say things, once, completely, without a qualifier. She smiled. Good, she agreed. The cherry blossoms moved in the April wind and the room was warm and the world outside was flowering in the decisive April way, and Issei thought, This is what the boy in the second row was building toward all along, without knowing it. Not the project. Not the gear. Not the supernatural world. This. Exactly this. In the first week of April, a new first-year student arrived at Ko Academy. She was unremarkable in every surface particular: average height, dark hair, the school uniform worn correctly, a schedule tucked under her arm, looking around the entrance hall with the slightly overwhelmed expression of new students everywhere. She had the specific quality of someone who was very good at appearing unremarkable, which Issei, passing through the entrance hall at precisely the wrong moment to avoid noticing her, noticed immediately. She was also, when he looked more carefully, trying very hard not to look at him. Specifically at the gauntlet, which was dormant but present. He stopped. She stopped pretending not to notice him and looked up with the expression of someone caught doing something they had been hoping would go unnoticed. Her eyes, he saw now, were very slightly too reflective. Like mirrors held at a shallow angle. The surface was human. Underneath the surface was something else. New student? He said. Yes, she said. Carefully. I am Issei Hayadu. Second year. He looked at her steadily, not threatening, simply present. Welcome to Ko. She looked at him for a long moment. Whatever she was calculating, the calculation ran quickly and ended in a decision. My name is Rhea, she said. I am told this school has a club for people like me. It does, he said. Come find us in the old building after last class. Third floor, left at the top of the stairs. Just like that? She said. Something in her voice was both cautious and relieved. Just like that, he said. The door is open. She looked at him for another moment. Then she adjusted the schedule under her arm and walked toward the first-year classrooms, and Issei watched her go and thought, the door opens again. It was always opening. He was beginning to understand that this was not an accident. It was the nature of what they had built. Chapter 48. Rhea and the Mirror. Rhea came to the ORC room at 4:15. She stood in the doorway for a moment before entering, which was the behavior of someone who had learned that entering unfamiliar spaces required assessment before commitment. Then she came in and sat in the chair Issei indicated, and she looked at the room the way new people always looked at it: the bookshelves, the chess set, the specific quality of the space, the people arranged in their habitual positions. She looked at all of them. She stopped on Sable, who was in their corner. You exist in the in-between spaces, she said to Sable. Not as a question. Yes, Sable said. I exist in the reflection spaces, Rhea said. The spaces between surfaces and what they show. It is similar but different. Similar but different is usually the most interesting category, Sable said, with the dry precision of someone who had personal experience of this. Something in Rhea's carefully maintained expression relaxed, fractionally. Yes, she said. It is. Her story came out in the way stories came out in the ORC room, at the pace the person was comfortable with, without pressure, into a space that had been made safe by months of other people doing the same thing. She was a mirror walker. Her family had a lineage connected to the reflective spaces between things, which she described with the practiced brevity of someone who had explained it to skeptics many times and had refined the explanation to its most efficient form. She could move through mirrors and reflective surfaces the way ordinary people moved through doors. She could see things in reflections that were not visible in direct observation. She could, in her natural state, exist partially between the surface and its reflection, which made her presence in ordinary spaces complicated. I wear the human layer most of the time, she said. It is not dishonest. It is, she searched, the version of me that fits in ordinary spaces. The mirror layer is also me. I am not hiding it. I am storing it. There is a difference, Lyriel said. She said it with the authority of someone who had spent months distinguishing between the two. Yes, Rhea said, and looked at Lyriel with the recognition of someone finding a shared language. There is. How did you find out about this school? Issei asked. She looked at him. Mirrors talk, she said. Not in words. In images. I have been seeing this building in reflective surfaces for 3 months. I saw the group. I saw, she paused, a crow on a gate post. And someone standing at the gate looking at the crow as though they understood each other. The room was quiet for a moment. Mirrors show things that are true, she said. Not always things that are current. Sometimes they show what is significant. The images they showed me of this place were, she looked around the room, warmer than anything I had seen in a long time. Issei thought about the crow and the months of October, and the question that had become an answer, and the life that had been waiting. The images were accurate, he said. She looked at him. Something in her mirror-like eyes caught the light of the room, the warm light that was different from the cold fluorescent light of the rest of the school, and held it. Yes, she said. I can see that. Kaneko moved to the cabinet above the chess set. She produced a cup. She filled it with tea. She set it in front of Rhea. Rhea looked at the cup. She looked at Kaneko. She looked at the room. Thank you, she said. Once. Completely. Kaneko nodded. She went back to her book. Issei watched this and thought, she is going to be fine. They always were, in this room, eventually. The room had a way of making fine possible. Chapter 49. The Training Ground in Spring. The old gymnasium in April was different from what it had been in October. The light was different, for one thing. The high windows that had let in cold gray light in autumn now let in the particular spring quality that made dust motes into gold and the worn floor into something almost warm. The sounds were different too: open windows, birds on the roof, the distant sound of the school's ordinary life at a lower frequency than winter's sealed window hush. The training was different. Not in its structure. The individual sessions and the collective sessions and the combinations work that had been the method since the beginning. Different in its quality. In October and November they had been training against a threat that was present and approaching. Now they trained because they had decided to be capable, which was a different motivation and produced a different kind of effort. The October training had been urgent. The April training was joyful. This surprised Issei when he recognized it. He stood at the edge of the gymnasium floor and watched Tosca moving through a combat sequence with her wings fully extended, not the careful partial extension of someone conserving space but the full spread of something that had decided it had the right to take up the space it needed, dark green and gold-edged and extraordinary in the spring light. Kurama running a concentration exercise with her 9 tails at full visibility, their silver tips catching the morning sun through the high windows in a pattern that was indistinguishable from magic. Stella practicing the active navigation that allowed her to track multiple trajectories simultaneously, her eyes blazing their gentle starlight, the air around her having the quality of deep space held in a human moment. Lyria was working with her full capability and had been for months, and the gymnasium had the particular quality it acquired when she was fully present, a green-gold aliveness, as though the space was growing. Mira was practicing form transitions with the focused delight of someone who had been told that understanding her own forms was a legitimate scholarly pursuit, and had embraced this fully. Sable moved through shadow work that had become, over months, more expressive than concealing. The shadows they created had shapes and intentions rather than purely defensive applications. Rhea was in the corner, tentatively, practicing something that involved standing near a large mirror she had brought and stepping partially into it and back again. And the stepping was careful and controlled in the way of someone learning that a capability they had always been cautious about could be used deliberately rather than only reactively. Issei watched all of it, and felt the warmth of it. Joyful, Drake said, confirming his earlier thought. Yes, Issei said. This is better than the previous version. The previous version was necessary. This version is the point of the previous version. Explain. The fear-driven work builds the capability. The joy-driven work builds the person. You need both. But the joy version is the one that lasts. A long pause. I have been in arms for 1400 years, Drake said. I have seen a great deal of fear-driven training. I have seen very little of this. I know. It is, Drake said, and the word he chose was careful and deliberate, precious. Issei looked at the gymnasium. At the spring light and the full wings and the silver tails and the starlit eyes and the shadows with shapes. At all of them being entirely themselves, in this space, in this morning, without apology. Yes, he said. It is. Issei trained too. He had not stopped training through any of it. The boosted gears development required consistent physical work, not because the gear needed him to be strong in the conventional sense, but because the amplification functioned best when it had a well-maintained foundation to work with. 6 months of consistent training had produced a foundation that was, by objective measure, significantly beyond what any unaugmented human of his age could achieve. He knew this not because he had been told but because he could feel the difference. The precision of his movement, the efficiency of his reaction time, the capacity to sustain effort at high intensity for longer than should have been possible. The gear had been amplifying everything consistently, which was what happened when you built everything consistently. He had known the math. The math had worked. What he had not expected was Tosca. She had been training beside him most mornings for months, their schedules having aligned naturally in the way that compatible routines aligned, and she was, as she had noted in October, a functional team. She was faster than him in short distances. He was more precise in sustained sequences. She had better instincts. He had better planning. They had developed, without discussing it, a way of training that used both. She set the pace and the pressure, he set the pattern and the strategy, and the result was a training session that was better than either of them would have produced alone. This morning she came in from outside with her wings still partly open, shedding spring light from the feathers, and she looked at him with her amber eyes and said, "Last one to the East End and back takes the longer route to the archive tomorrow." "That seems like a bet I should think about," he said. "It seems like a bet you are going to lose because you are still deciding and I have already started." She was already moving. He was half a second behind her. The spring light filled the gymnasium and they moved through it, and he thought, this is also joyful. Precisely this. Chapter 50. What Kailindra says about the long view. Kailindra had a habit of sitting in the archive on Sunday mornings when it was empty except for whatever combination of the group chose to come, and reading things she had not had time to read during the week. These were not the project texts. They were the personal archive, things she had kept over 4 centuries because they interested her, not because they were useful. The personal archive was, she had mentioned once, considerably larger than the professional one. Issei had been coming on Sunday mornings since February. He came early, before anyone else, and he sat across from her in the chair that had become his chair in the outer room, and they read in the same quiet for an hour before anyone else arrived. They had not discussed this arrangement. It had simply occurred and continued, which was how Issei recognized it as something both of them had chosen without needing to say so. On a Sunday in mid-April, Kailindra set down her book and looked at him with the amber assessment. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Tell me. When I was young, approximately your age, I believed that the purpose of intelligence was to solve problems. I was good at problems. I found them satisfying. I moved from one to the next and I accumulated solutions and I was, by the measure of everyone around me, extraordinary. What changed? I started living long enough to see the problems I had solved recur." She looked at her hands. "I solved a problem and 2 generations later it was back, in a slightly different form, because I had addressed the symptom and not the system. And I solved the system and the system changed and the problem returned through a different channel." A pause. "After about 100 years of this I understood that problems were not the point." "What is the point?" "Capacity," she said. "The ability of a system to address its own problems. Not the solution, but the capability of the system to keep solving as it encounters new forms of the same fundamental challenges." He thought about this. "That is what the representation proposal does," he said slowly. "It does not solve the problem of unclassified beings being underprotected. It creates a mechanism by which the faction system can address that problem and its variations as they evolve." "Yes," she said. "You understood this intuitively. You built toward capacity rather than solution without being told that was the right approach. That is not common. I have had good examples," he said. "The people in this group are capable. I did not give them capability. I made space for the capability they already had." "Yes. And making space for capability in others is itself a form of extraordinary capacity." She looked at him steadily. "What you did with this group is what took me 200 years to begin to understand. You did it at 16, with no model for it, in 6 months, under conditions that were actively threatening." He did not know how to receive that. He tried the method Aquino had been teaching him. He sat with it for a moment, without diminishing it or deflecting it, and then he said, "Thank you for telling me. Once. Completely." No qualifier. Kailindra looked at him. Something in her amber eyes was warm in the specific way that 4 centuries produced when they found the thing they had been waiting for. "You are welcome," she said, and went back to her book. Later that morning, when others had arrived and the archive was its usual mix of comfortable work and comfortable companionship, Kailindra told Issei one more thing. She told it quietly, between the moment when Sona asked her a question about historical precedent and the moment when Lyriel arrived with a cross-referenced index of something she had found in the third room. "I have been thinking about what comes after," she said. "After the vote. After the formal protections are in place. And I want to give the archive to the group." He looked at her. "Not as a transfer of ownership. As a transfer of stewardship. I will remain involved. But 400 years of documentation about how the system has worked and failed and almost been fixed and failed again should not exist in the hands of a single person, however long-lived." She looked at the shelves. "It should exist in a structure that can outlast any individual. It should be," she paused, "institutional." "You want to make it a real archive," he said. "With multiple keepers. With a methodology. With succession planning. With the capacity to keep growing as the world keeps producing things that need to be understood and kept. Lyriel would be central to that," he said. "Her resonance index memory. Her archival instinct. I know. We have been talking about it." Quietly. She looked at him. "I wanted your opinion before I proposed it formally to the group." "My opinion is yes," he said immediately. "I thought it would be. It is the right step," he said. "The archive becoming something that can outlast any person is exactly the kind of capacity building you were describing. You are doing to the archive what we are doing to the faction structure." She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I am." A long pause. "It took me 400 years," she said. "It took you 6 months. You had to build the understanding before you could use it," he said. "I got to use the understanding you built." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "That is a generous reading." "It is the accurate one," he said. She looked at him with the amber eyes, for centuries deep, and said nothing, because some things were larger than what words could add to. Chapter 51. Tosca's mother arrives in summer. June arrived, and with it the first real heat of the year, and with the heat came Tosca's mother. Her name was Varen. She was larger than Tosca in the specific way that dragons were larger than their children, not in scale but in presence, the sense of something with a longer history and a denser gravity. Her scales were darker, deep forest green shading to near black at the shoulders, and her wings, when she arrived, were fully extended as a matter of simple preference, which created a wingspan in the school courtyard that drew precisely the level of attention she clearly expected and was entirely indifferent to. Issei was waiting when she arrived, because Tosca had asked him to be there, and he had understood why. Tosca wanted someone who would not be overwhelmed by her mother's scale to be present for the introduction. Varen looked at Issei the way she looked at everything, directly, with the patient assessment of something that had been reading the world for a very long time. "You are the one," she said. She said it the way Silvara had said it, with the specific meaning of people who had heard something significant about someone and were now checking the evidence. "I am one of several," he said, as he had to Silvara. "You are the first. The one my daughter wrote to me about last December." Varen looked at him carefully. She said, "He does not perform tolerance, he simply is not bothered." She said it was the highest thing she could think of to say about a person. "I was honored to hear it then," he said. "I am honored to hear it again." Varen looked at him for another long moment. Her amber eyes, darker than Tosca's, were conducting the same kind of assessment he associated with her daughter, precise, without social performance, reading what was actually there rather than what was presented. "She has her wings extended here," Varen said. It was not quite a question. "She goes to the roof sometimes when she needs to let them breathe fully," he said. "But in the past few months she has been extending here, and in the gymnasium, and in the training sessions. She stopped needing the roof as much." Something moved through Varen's expression. "A large, slow thing. Since she was 8, Varen said, she has kept them folded when she was not safe to extend. It became habit. I worried it would become permanent." "It was not permanent," Issei said. It was waiting for the right circumstances. Varen looked at him one final time with the assessment in full operation. Then she did something he did not expect. She extended one wing forward, very slightly, the tip angled toward him. It was, he would learn later, the Dragon Court equivalent of Silvara's shoulder touch. The gesture that meant, I see what you are and it is right. He received it the way he received all things now. Once, completely, no qualifier. Then Tosca arrived from the direction of the old building, slightly out of breath, and Varen turned to her daughter, and something in the Dragon Court mother's face did the thing that only happened when you saw the person you loved being fully themselves. Tosca's wings were extended. Varen said her daughter's name once, in the Dragon Court tongue, and it was the most complete single word Issei had heard in a language he did not speak. Varen spent 4 days in Ko. She came to the ORC room and she sat in Tosca's corner, which accommodated her larger wingspan without complaint, and she assessed each member of the group with the patient precision that was clearly a family trait. She asked questions that were direct and expected complete answers. She ate lunch with all of them on the second day, which was a meal that lasted 3 hours because she kept asking things and the answers kept leading to more things. She asked Kaelindra about the resonance index system and they talked for an hour in a language that predated the current Dragon Court tongue by several centuries, and both of them emerged from the conversation with the specific expression of people who have found someone who speaks a language they thought only they knew. She asked Stella about the antecedent. Stella told her. Varen was very still for a long moment. Then she said, It has always been interested in the dragon bloodlines. We have known it was watching. We did not know it had moved closer. It moved when the group moved, Stella said. It is interested in what was built. It is interested in him, Varen said, looking at Issei. In all of us, Stella said. He is the convergence point. Varen looked at Issei with the assessment that had been running the entire 4 days and said, The Dragon Court has been aware of the boosted gears lineage for centuries. We have been waiting for the right host. The previous hosts were, she chose the word carefully, capable. You are something different. What am I different at? He said. Understanding what capability is for, she said simply. Most people with extraordinary power understand what power can do. You understand what it should do. That is not a skill. It is a character. It cannot be taught. He sat with that. Completely. No qualifier. Thank you, he said. Varen made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was adjacent to approval. My daughter chose well, she said. Not to him. Not to Tosca. To the room in general, as a statement of fact about the world. Tosca, across the room, said nothing. But her wings shifted in the small adjustment he knew now as the equivalent of a full smile. Chapter 52. The second year begins. September arrived and with it the start of a new academic year. Issei moved to the 3rd year of Ko Academy, which was a fact so ordinary that it existed in a different category from everything else that had happened in the past 12 months. He received his new class assignment, and his new homeroom, and he sat in the second row by habit and looked at the board and thought, I started here. I am still here. The here has changed entirely. Rosweiss-sensei was his homeroom teacher again. She looked at him from behind the attendance book with the expression she had been wearing since April, the one that was no longer primarily assessment. It was something more like recognition between people who shared a specific understanding of things. She called on him twice. He answered correctly. She made the mark in her attendance book. After class she said, 3rd year? How does it feel? Like the right place to be, he said. She looked at him. The invitation you mentioned in April. The open door. Yes. I would like to take it, she said. When there is a moment. I have been, as I mentioned, watching for a long time. Come Thursday, he said. After last period. We are always there on Thursday. She nodded. She went back to her desk. He went to his morning class. Thursday was going to be good. He was already looking forward to it. The ORC room had changed in 12 months. It was the same room, same bookshelves, same chess set, same cedar smell, same window with the same view of the coast school grounds. But it had the quality that spaces acquired when they had been used for important purposes over time. The quality of a room that knew its own significance. Issei stood in the doorway on the first Thursday of the new term and looked at it before going in. Tosca was in her corner with her wings at the half extension she had settled into as her default, no longer the careful fold of someone trying to occupy less space. Stella was on the floor with a new chart, the first major navigation project she had started since March, tracking something she said was developing slowly and beautifully, and would probably take months to fully read. Karama was writing, always writing, the personal record that had become the living document of a life being actively examined. Sable's shadow filled the corner completely, richly, with the deliberate presence of someone who had decided that presence was a gift rather than an imposition. Lyriel was at the side table with 3 volumes from the archive, making notes with the concentrated focus of someone who had found her exact function and was exercising it with full capability. Mira was on the laptop that had become her primary connection to the Chimeric Academy, where her capstone work had been accepted and was now being cited in 3 other students' projects, a fact that still produced in her the specific bright shock of someone who had not expected their work to travel. Rhea was practicing the mirror crossing with increasing confidence, the reflection space she moved through slowly becoming something she inhabited rather than something she navigated anxiously. Sona was at the side desk with the political updates from Surzex, which she had taken over managing because her precision and her family's familiarity with faction politics made her the most efficient processor of the ongoing review. She made notes at the speed of someone who thought faster than she wrote, and had accepted this as a permanent condition. Aquino was making tea, which was what she always did, and she looked at Issei in the doorway and smiled the real smile and said nothing because nothing needed to be said. Rias was at the desk. She looked up when he came in. The expression that was past all the others, settled and permanent and entirely hers, crossed her face and settled there. 3rd year, she said. 3rd year, he confirmed. How does it feel? The same as everything else, he said. He came in and sat in the chair that had become his, which was not behind the desk and not in a corner but in the particular position that allowed him to see everyone and be seen by everyone simultaneously. Right. Good, she said. He reached across the desk. She met him in the middle. The chess game on the side table was in a new position. Sona had been rearranging it over the summer as a thinking exercise, and the pieces had arrived at a configuration that was, he thought, better than the original. Rossweiss came on Thursday. She knocked. She came in. She stood in the room and looked at it, and at everyone in it with the specific expression of someone who has been watching something from a distance for a long time, and has finally walked through the door. She sat in the offered chair. She folded her hands. Valkyrie, she said, because she had decided the truth was the right starting point. Former. The former is still complicated but less than it was. I have been in Co for 2 years as a teacher and as, she paused, an observer who was deciding whether to be something more. And you have decided, Issei said. I have decided. She looked at the group. At each of them, the specific and extraordinary people in their habitual positions. I watched you build this from the first week of last year. I watched everything from the second row of homeroom and from the view out the teacher's lounge window and from the understanding that something important was happening that did not need my interference but might, eventually, find space for my participation. It does, Ria said. Good. Rossweiss looked at the chess set. At the bookshelves. At the window. At Issei. I have 200 years of Valkyrie tactical and strategic knowledge, and I have been a secondary school teacher for 2 years, and I have been alone since I left the service, and I would like, if the space exists, to not be alone anymore. She said it plainly, without performance, with the straightforward honesty of someone who had decided that the direct path was the only one worth taking. The room received it the way it received all things, warmly, completely, without reservation. Kaneko got up. She went to the cabinet above the chess set. She produced a cup. She filled it. She set it in front of Rossweiss. Rossweiss looked at the cup. She looked at Kaneko. White tea, Kaneko said. I notice you drink it. Same as Citri-senpai. Thank you, Rossweiss said. You are welcome, Kaneko said, and sat back down. Issei looked at Kaneko and thought, the most quietly extraordinary person in this room. And the room was full of extraordinary people. Chapter 53. The vote. The vote came on a Tuesday in October. A year, almost exactly, since everything had started. Surzex's message arrived in the morning through Graphia, which meant it arrived in the ORC room on a sheet of paper that materialized on Rias's desk at 8:15 with the formal seal of the Lucifer's office. Rias picked it up. She read it. She set it down. She looked at Issei. He had been watching her face, which was the way he processed most things. Her face told him what he needed to know before she said the words. 3-1, she said. Formal adoption of the representation provision. Effective in 60 days pending administrative implementation. The ORC room was very quiet. Then Stella, from the floor, said the trajectories just changed. All of them? Issei asked. All of them, she said. She was looking at the ceiling with her blazing eyes. Everything that was moving toward this point has, she paused, branched. The convergence happened and now the lines are opening out. New directions. New possibilities. Her voice had the particular quality it had when she was describing something unprecedented. I have never seen so many new trajectories appear simultaneously. What does it mean? Rhea asked. She was newer to the group and therefore asked the questions that the longer tenured members sometimes forgot to ask because they had learned to read Stella's descriptions. It means, Stella said, still looking at the ceiling, that the constraint has been removed. The thing that was limiting the possible directions has been addressed. And in its absence, a long pause, filled with the slow rotation of stars in her eyes, everything becomes more possible. The room absorbed this. Tosca's wings extended fully. Not as a reaction, not as a response to threat. Simply as an expression of what she felt, which was something too large for words and needed the full span of her. Karama's 9 tails spread around her in the warm light of the October morning, fully visible, fully present, taking up the space they had always been entitled to take. Sable's shadow filled every corner of the room simultaneously, and it was not dark, it was deep, and it had the quality of something that had found the shape it always should have had. Lyriel's ears were at their full extension, and she had her hand over her mouth, and her eyes were bright with the specific brightness of someone who has watched their family's 3-generation effort arrive at its destination. Mira held all 4 arms up, a gesture that had no human equivalent but had, in its context, an unmistakable meaning. Rhea was crying quietly, which surprised her. She looked at the tears on her hands with mild wonder. I have not cried in a long time, she said. It is appropriate, Stella said gently. The stars do not object. Sona had set down her pen. She was sitting very still with her hands in her lap and her eyes closed, and she was, Issei thought, doing what she did when something was too large for immediate processing, filing it correctly, in full, before allowing herself to respond to it. Roswise stood at the window. She was looking out at the school grounds, at the co-October morning that was, by the measures available to Issei's ordinary human perception, identical to the co-October morning of exactly 1 year ago. Same trees, same gate, same path. But she was looking at it with the expression of someone who understood that identical surfaces could cover completely different worlds. Aquino sat beside Issei. She did not say anything. She took his hand, the non-gauntlet one, and held it briefly, and it was the specific gesture that said, I know. I have been here the whole time. This is what it was for. Rias was standing. She had stood when she said 3-1, and she had not sat back down, and she was looking at the message on the desk with the expression that was past all expressions, including the one he had named the permanent one. This was something older and larger. The expression of someone receiving the completion of something started before they were born. Issei, she said. Yes, my grandmother. I know, he said. She looked at him. Tears, which she rarely permitted, were present, held carefully. She would have, Rias started. Stopped. Yes, he said. She would have. Rias nodded. She picked up the message. She held it against her chest the way she had held the journal, both hands, the gesture of someone holding something precious and heavy. Then she smiled. Fully. Completely. The smile that was entirely her. And the room, which had been holding a very large breath for a very long time, breathed out. Drake was blazing. Not the emergency blaze. The celebratory one, which Issei had not known existed until this moment when the gauntlet was red gold and warm, and the warmth was not the training warmth, or the alert warmth, but something Issei classified, after a moment, as joy. Well, Drake said. Yes, Issei said. 1400 years, Drake said, and this is the best Tuesday. Issei laughed. It came out of him without decision, complete and real, and it was the laugh of a person who was entirely in the right moment, and knew it. Everyone looked at him. He did not explain. They did not need an explanation. They had all heard Drake. The best Tuesday, Kurama repeated, with her dry precision. That is high praise from a heavenly dragon. The highest, Drake confirmed. We should celebrate, Akino said. Properly. Tonight. Yes, said everyone, in different voices and different tones and with different specific reasons for meaning it, all of them real, all of them right. Chapter 54. The Celebration. The celebration was not planned, which was why it was exactly right. It was not a formal event. It was the ORC room in the evening with enough food to feed 15 people, which was approximately how many people arrived over the course of the night, because word had traveled through the group's extended network and people came because they wanted to be in the room where the thing that had happened had been built. Hana arrived with Kurama's family, who had been informed and had traveled from the north with the speed of people for whom this news justified the journey. Silvara came with Liriel's father, a quiet scholar who looked at everything in the room with the gentle wonder of someone who had always known his wife's project was real but had not seen its physical form before. Varen sent a message because she could not travel quickly enough, and the message was characteristically brief and characteristically complete. Tell them the Dragon Court celebrates with you. Tell my daughter her wings have always been right. Kaelindra came with the personal archive, which was impractical and entirely correct, because the personal archive contained, among other things, 40 years of Riasa's grandmother and 60 years of her own patient waiting, and it belonged in the room where the waiting had ended. Tannen arrived, which surprised everyone, because Tannen had not suggested he was planning to come, but he stood in the doorway of the ORC room with the gravity of a retired dragon king, and the expression of someone who had lived long enough to know that moments like this were rare and should be attended. Drake, he said. Tannen, Drake said. You came. I heard it was the best Tuesday, Tannen said. I did not want to miss the best Tuesday. Drake's warmth increased substantially. Surzex arrived at 9 in the evening with Grafia, which was unexpected and produced a specific quality of attention in the room. He was in civilian clothing again, which Issei had come to understand was his signal that he was attending as a brother rather than as the Lucifer. He went to Rias first. He put his arms around her, and she let him. And it was the specific embrace of siblings who had been through something together, and were on the other side of it. She would have said, he told her quietly, that this is better than anything she imagined. I know, Rias said. Kaelindra wrote it in the archive. The night of the presentation. She wrote it for both of them. He held his sister for a moment longer. Then he stepped back and looked at the room, all of it, the specific extraordinary fullness of it. He looked at Issei. I want to say something to you, he said. Then say it, Issei said, which was what he said to everyone. Surzex smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that the Lucifer expression sat over in official settings. My grandmother spent 40 years building towards something she did not live to see. My sister has been working towards something she understood better than anyone but could not fully articulate. You walked into a school in October, and in 12 months you gave the argument the shape it needed and gathered the people who made it real. He paused. I do not have a word for what you are, Surzex said. I have been looking for one since March and I have not found it. The closest I have is necessary. Not in the sense that we could not have eventually found another path, but necessary in the sense of the precise right thing at the precise right time. Issei sat with it. Completely. No qualifier. Thank you, he said. Surzex nodded. He went to find Grafia and the food. Rias took Issei's hand. He held it. The room was full of people talking and laughing and being present with the particular fullness of people who had come through something difficult together, and were now in the ease that followed difficulty when it is resolved rather than merely survived. The October night was clear outside the window and the stars were visible, and Stella was looking at them with the expression she wore when she was reading something beautiful. The trajectories, Issei said. Still opening, she said, without looking away from the sky. In every direction. Endlessly. Good, he said. He looked at the room. He looked at Tosca's wings in the window light. At Karama's tails. At Sable's shadow, decorative now, shaped like a garden in one corner. At Lyriel's father looking at everything with gentle wonder. At Rhea, talking with Mira about the mirror spaces and the architecture of inclusion. At Rosweiss with her 200-year Valkyrie knowledge and her white tea. At Aquino, who caught his eye and smiled the real smile, the same real smile she had been smiling since the day she stopped managing it. At Kaneko, eating, which meant she was content. At Sona, who was not making notes, which meant she was allowing herself to simply be in the moment, which Issei knew was difficult for her and was therefore the most significant sign of celebration she could offer. At Rias, beside him, holding his hand, looking at him with the expression that was not past all the others anymore because it had become the only expression, the one that was her actual face when she was with the people she had chosen. Thank you, she said. Not for anything specific. For all of it. He squeezed her hand. Thank you, he said back. For all of it. Outside, a crow called once from the gate post. Clear and deliberate and unhurried, the way it always called, as though it had known all along and was simply noting the conclusion. Chapter 55. What the Crow Knows. Issei went to the gate the next morning at 7. The celebration had lasted until midnight and the group had separated into the October dark, and Issei had walked home under the clear stars and slept the deep sleep of someone who had nothing unresolved and woke at 6 with the particular clarity of a morning that knew what it followed. He made tea. He put it in a thermos. He walked to school early, because there was something he wanted to do before the day began. The crow was on the gate post. Of course it was. He sat on the bench outside the gate, the same bench where he had sat the first week of school a year ago, drawing dragons in his history notes, and listening to everything and feeling like someone standing outside a room where important things happened. He opened his thermos, and drank his tea and looked at the crow. The crow looked back. I know I said thank you in March, he said. I want to say it again. Properly. The crow tilted its head. I do not know what you are, he said, which was still true. But I know you have been here since the beginning. Before the beginning. At every significant moment. Watching. A pause. I think you are something like what Stella described. An antecedent. Something old enough to be here before the categories existed. The crow did not confirm or deny this. It looked at him with the specific crow expression that was impossible to read and full of content simultaneously. Whatever you are, he said, you watched this happen. You were here when it was a question in my chest and here when it became an answer, and here all the way through until yesterday when it became, he paused, something that will keep going. He looked at the gate. At the school beyond it. At the October morning, cool and clear and beginning. The people in that room, he said. Each one of them is extraordinary. Each one of them was carrying something heavy and put some of it down here. Each one of them became more themselves than they were before. He looked at the crow. I know I was part of that. And I know that is not something I did alone. I know I was part of something that was already moving. Something that started before me and will continue after. The crow's expression did not change. But something in the air around the gate post shifted slightly, the way air shifted in Kalindra's archive when something that was paying attention paid closer attention. I am going to keep going, he said. The work does not end with the vote. The vote is what Sirzek said it was, a door. What matters is what we build on the other side. He looked at his hand, the gauntlet hand, dormant and warm. Drake and I have been talking about what comes next. There are things to build that we have not started yet. There are people who have not found the door yet. The archive needs to grow. The new protections need to be implemented correctly, and that implementation will require watching and adjusting over years. He looked at the crow. I am not worried about any of it, he said. I want you to know that. Not because it will be easy. Because the people I am doing it with are, he paused, the ones worth doing it with. And that makes the difference between a burden and a life. He finished his tea. He stood. The crow spread its wings. Both wings, fully, in the October morning light, and they caught the early sun in a way that made them briefly, completely gold. Then it folded them and sat still and looked at him with its patient expression. Issei nodded once. The nod of someone communicating something that needed no translation. He walked through the gate and into the school. Behind him, the crow called once, in the voice that was lower than a caw and more deliberate, and the sound of it went out into the morning, and the morning held it, and the gate stood open, as it always did, as it was always going to. Chapter 56. October. A year later. The second crow. A year after everything began, the first snow came early to Kuo. Not real snow, the suggestion of snow, fine and intermittent, the kind that melted before it reached the ground but changed the quality of the air and the light and announced that winter was considering its approach. Issei stood at the ORC room window on the last Thursday of October, and watched it fall and disappear. The room behind him was full. Not unusually full, not for a Thursday. Thursdays had become the day when more people came than strictly needed to, because Thursday had become the day the group gathered not for specific work but for the particular quality of being together that the group had developed over the year, and that nobody had named, but everyone had come to rely on. The archive proposal had been formally established in September, the Living Archive, with Kailindra as founding director and Lyriel as the first appointed keeper, with a methodology for expansion and succession that would allow it to outlast any individual. They had celebrated it with less fanfare than the vote, which was appropriate because it was more practical, and the practical things deserved a different kind of recognition, use rather than ceremony. The implementation of the formal representation provisions was proceeding. Sona managed most of the monitoring, with Issei's occasional input when something required the specific kind of structural thinking he was best at. It was going more slowly than the optimistic estimate and faster than the pessimistic one, which Kailindra said was exactly how everything worth doing went, and which Issei took as confirmation that they were on the right track. The group had grown. Rhea had been part of it for 7 months and had the quality that all the long-tenured members had, the quality of someone who had become more themselves and was comfortable with the size. There were others in the early stages of contact. A Harpy student at a school 3 cities over who had found Myra's capstone work and written to the Chimeric Academy asking who had written it, and had been put in contact with the group. A water spirit whose territory overlapped with the forest courts, whose family was newly protected under the representation provisions, and who had sent Lyriel a letter of thanks that had led to a correspondence that Lyriel suspected was going to lead to a visit in the spring. The door, as Issei had understood it would be, kept opening. He was still standing at the window when Rias came to stand beside him. She looked at the fine not quite snow falling and disappearing in the October air. 1 year, she said. 1 year, he confirmed. If I had known, she said, when I asked you to walk with me in September, what it would become, what would you have done differently? She thought about it seriously, which was what she did with questions that deserved serious answers. Nothing, she said. I would have done nothing differently. The things that needed to be hard were hard, and the things that needed to take time took time. Knowing in advance would not have improved it. It would only have removed, she paused, searching, the texture of it. The way it felt to not know, and still keep going. Yes, he said. That is exactly right. She looked at him. He looked back. Outside, the fine snow fell and disappeared and fell again. I have been thinking about something, she said. What? The group. What it is and what it is becoming. She turned from the window to face him properly. We started because of a threat. We stayed because of work. And we are, she paused, we are something now that neither of those things fully describes. We are a group of people who have chosen each other. Specifically. With full knowledge of what the choosing means. Yes, he said. I want to name it, she said. Not formally. Not for the faction records. For us. Something that says, this is what we are. He thought about it. He thought about all the words that were available and all the things they failed to capture, and all the ways the thing they had built exceeded its descriptors. We are the people in this room, he said finally. That is the name. The specific people in this specific room who chose each other. The name is us. She looked at him. That is not a name, she said. That is a description. Names that are descriptions are the truest ones, he said. A pause. Then yes. All right. The people in this room. The people in this room, he agreed. She took his hand. He held it. It keeps getting larger, she said, meaning the room and the work and the thing they had built and the life that was in it. Yes, he said. That is the point. At the end of the afternoon, when the group was beginning to disperse into the October evening, Stella looked up from her charts. There is a new crow, she said. Everyone looked at her. On the gate post, she said. I can see the trajectory from here. It just arrived. Very young. Watching the school the way the other one watches the school. A second crow, Issei said. The old one is still there, Stella said. They are both there. She looked at her chart. The new one has been watching for about 3 weeks. Since the implementation began. Issei stood and went to the window. In the last light of the October afternoon, he could see the gate post. There were 2 crows. One of them was the crow he had known for a year, still, patient, ancient in the way its stillness was ancient. The other was smaller and brighter and turned its head to look at the school with the particular attention of something that had just found a thing it was going to be interested in for a very long time. A second one, Tosca said from her corner. She sounded, to Issei's ear, genuinely pleased. The first one is teaching it, Stella said. She was reading the trajectory with the focused brightness of someone encountering something they had not expected. They are both watching. The old one has been here since before us. The new one is, she paused. The new one arrived at the beginning of the implementation. As though it was called by what is being built. As though the work attracted something new, Issei said. Yes. Stella looked at him. I think that is going to keep happening. The larger the work becomes, the more it will draw the things that are interested in it. He looked at the 2 crows on the gate post. Old and new, patient and bright, both watching the school with the specific attention of something that understood significance. He thought about the antecedent. About the word Stella had used, evaluative. Like someone reading a book they had been waiting to find. He thought about what it meant to be in the middle of a story that was interesting enough to attract readers you could not see. It was, he decided, the right kind of interesting. Good, he said, to the window, to the crows, to the evening and the work and the year that had been and the years that were coming. Chapter 57. The End of the Beginning. There was a moment, in the last week of October, that Issei thought about for a long time afterward. Not a dramatic moment. Not an event. Just a moment, one of the thousands of moments that made up the life the project had become. He was in the ORC room at 7 in the evening, later than usual, finishing a piece of analysis on the first month of implementation data that Sona had asked for and that required exactly the kind of sustained structural thinking he was best at. The room was mostly empty. Tosca was still there, reading in her corner with her wings at their comfortable half-extension, the familiar rustling of pages that he could have identified in a crowd as specifically hers. Stella was on the floor with a new chart that she was developing with the slow care of someone who had decided not to rush a beautiful thing. Rias was at the desk across from him, reading the latest correspondence from Surzex, with the expression she wore when she was reading something that confirmed something she had already believed. It was ordinary. Completely and exactly ordinary. The cedar smell and the chess set and the amber desk lamp and the sound of pages and the scratch of Issei's pen and outside, settling into its October evening. Drake was warm, which he always was, the constant warmth that Issei had stopped noticing precisely because it was always there, always warm, always present. He set down his pen. He looked at the room. He thought about the boy in the second row who had drawn dragons in his history notes, and thought he was ordinary. He thought about the question that had been building in his chest before he had words for it. He thought about the crow and the gate post and the first October morning that had felt like it was waiting. He thought about all the people who had come through the door since then, each one carrying something and each one putting some of it down, and each one becoming more themselves in the process. He thought about scales in the morning sun and 9 tails visible in the school gate mist, and a shadow that had found its correct shape and a navigator whose mother had left her the right stars. He thought about an elf who had stopped pulling her ears back and a chimeric architect who designed spaces for every kind of presence, and a mirror walker who was learning that her gift was not a liability but a door. He thought about a woman 400 years old who had written finally in an archive by the light of an underworld afternoon. He thought about a grandmother he had never met who had built something for people who had not been born yet. He thought about a Valkyrie who had watched from the second row and had finally come through the door. About a student council president who made notes in every significant moment and had once, on the best Tuesday, put down her pen. He thought about Rias. She looked up from the correspondence at that moment, the specific moment when he was thinking her name, which happened sometimes because they had developed the kind of attention to each other that was perceptive in both directions. She looked at him. He looked back. "What?" she said. Not alarmed. Curious. The way she asked things now, openly, without managing the answer. "Nothing," he said. "Everything." She waited. "I was thinking," he said, "about what it is. All of this. What the word is." "You said the name is us," she reminded him. "I know. I was thinking about a different word. Not for the group. For the thing we have been doing." She waited. "I think it is called home," he said. The room was very quiet. Tosca's page turning stopped. Stella's pen was still. Rias looked at him with all of the expression she had ever worn, the revised assessment, and the wonder, and the unguarded and the permanent one, all of them at once, and underneath them the expression that was the foundation, the expression of someone who had been building something without knowing its name and had just heard it said for the first time. "Yes," she said. "Yes," Tosca said from her corner, without looking up. She had heard. She said it simply, as a statement of fact. "Yes," said Stella, from the floor. "Yes," said Drake, with all 1400 years of his particular gravity, and the gauntlet blazed warm and red gold and stayed. The October evening continued. Issei went back to his analysis. Rias went back to her correspondence. Tosca turned her page. Stella moved her pen across the new chart. The cedar smell was in the room. The chess set was mid-game. The amber lamp was warm. Outside, 2 crows sat on the gate post in the last light of the day. One old and still. One young and bright. Both watching the school with the attention of things that understood that what was happening inside was worth watching. The gate was open. It was always open. The leaves on the old oak tree at the edge of the school grounds were at their deepest red, the color they reached every October before they fell and the tree began again. Issei had watched those leaves since the first morning he had sat outside and drawn a small dragon in his history notes, and felt the question beginning in his chest. The question had become an answer. The answer had become a life. The life had become, in the specific and irreplaceable way that lives became things when they were lived fully and with the right people, a home. And the home was open, and the door was open, and the work was continuing, and the crows were watching, and the stars were opening in every direction endlessly, and Issei Haida sat in the second row of a room that had always been waiting for him and did his work and was entirely, completely, and without reservation himself, which was, in the end, the most extraordinary thing of all.